that if Coca-Cola did not exist, some other cold drink company would exist, basically. Okay,
Okay,
because you
right.
can, and they exist also. So you can argue that way. You can argue like that, basically. Last time in the last pod, we had kind of discussed about these things, the graphs, basically, like the dopa,
Dopamine.
like
Yeah.
what dopaminergic activity, what it does to the graphs, basically. And
Hmm.
surprisingly, dopaminergic activity does not do this only to the emotions versus time graph. It
Hmm.
also does this to all other graphs also, like for example, net worth versus time, or energy versus time, energy consumption that that particular individual is doing versus time, and so on and so forth, basically.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So essentially, like, it runs in parallel. Things run in parallel, basically,
Hmm.
with respect to each other. So there is
Yeah.
a dopaminergic spike and then crashes followed by that particular spike.
Hmm.
And serotonin type behavior, or you can say long term behavior, the two marshmallow behavior, basically. Okay,
Right. Right.
that first goes down and then has an, like, upward trajectory, basically. It's
Right.
like that.
Right.
So I have a heuristic over here that we can develop. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let us say emotions versus time, right? Or anything versus time, pretty much. Matlab, this could be net worth versus time. This could be anything, like anything similar, basically. Even this could be social capital versus time.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
because surprisingly, and even not so surprisingly, these kind of chase each other, basically. Like,
Okay.
they kind of are correlated with each other, you can say. If
Right.
emotions are good, net worth can be good, although not always, and social capital can be good, although not always. There is a loose correlation between them, basically, which
Right.
makes sense also, kind of a thing,
Ah.
because this is what is said to be success in the human sphere of existence, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so let's understand this one heuristic, which is quite an important heuristic, actually. Let us say we are at 0 0. Okay, so
Okay.
you need to suffer and you need to go through pain in order to actually later benefit from it, right?
Hmm.
So this is the kind of shape of the graph, basically. Now,
Right.
I would like us to recall that, look at what is the shape of the valuation of a company. Okay. See, what we are trying to connect with, what? Emotion versus time inside a human psyche. We are
Hmm.
trying to connect with the valuation of a company.
Net worth.
You
Net
remember
worth.
we
Value.
talked about the JS curve, basically.
Yes. Yes.
So J, and then there is ascension and there is
Yeah.
plateauing.
Yeah.
And unless further innovation happens, then this cannot go into another JS curve like this.
Correct.
If innovation doesn't happen, then there is decline.
Hmm.
And if some Vijay Mallya or Dan Bilzerian comes, basically, as a owner of the company, at the helm
Right.
of the company, then there is dopaminergic behavior. So there is faster decline,
Right.
basically,
Right. Correct. Correct.
like this. Okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there is slower decline, basically. Gradual decline may happen. But if
Hmm.
some dopaminergic person comes, then there is even faster decline, basically, like this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
dopaminergic behavior is faster decline.
Hmm.
No behavior, null behavior is slow decline.
Slow decline. Right.
Okay. And serotonin behavior is ascension, basically.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, one important thing, and this is quite confusing also. So, like, let's discuss it very properly and minutely and make sure
Hmm.
that, like, it is clear, basically.
Hmm.
Okay. What if you are about to die in 2 days, basically? Then the turnaround time or the turnaround of this serotonin cycle is not going to happen only, no?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, let's say here is death.
Correct.
Here is death. Then what?
Yeah. So then
Then
it's almost. Hmm.
does that mean that before death you should just be dopaminergic, basically, because time is less?
But that is how most people think of things, right? Like if you ask people that, hey, you're gonna
Yeah,
die in 2 days,
they
what's
have
the
the
what is
they have the YOLO philosophy, like you only live once, kind of
right?
thing.
Yeah. So I mean, many folks would answer with dopaministic things only. Maybe some people would say spend time with loved ones. That's the only thing I can think of, which is serotonin
Serotonin based, yeah,
driven. But
basically.
otherwise,
Yeah.
most people would say like blow money
Hmm.
on like I don't know
Yeah,
drugs or
yeah,
alcohol.
blow money on dopa activities, basically,
Yeah.
like buy a
Yeah.
Ferrari or
Exactly.
whatever. Huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you can, basically, then buy a Ferrari and go with that bill. Okay.
Hmm.
Fine. So here is my thinking about this basically. Let's for a moment say that let's enter a thought experiment. We are detected with a deadly virus and
Hmm.
we are going to die in, let's say, 1 month, something like
Hmm.
that. Okay.
Hmm.
And then this thought experiment can be repeated for 1 day and stuff like that. Then
Right.
how would we live basically? All right. How would we live? We have to think about that. Hmm?
Hmm.
So when we delve deep into this, we will understand that there are various modes of living basically. Okay.
Okay.
And obviously, these modes of living might fall on a spectrum, but for simplicity, I'm going to divide them into three categories basically.
Hmm.
Okay. One
Okay.
is the ignorance is bliss, chilling type of mode basically, like uh, not getting bothered about too many things basically, right?
Right.
So
Right.
one is like the ignorance is bliss, the kind of, you can say, for lack of a better word right now, without meaning it as offense basically, the mediocrity filled dumb mode of living basically, kind of a thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
So how
Okay.
we all are like when we are asleep basically, right?
Hmm.
That way. The dumb
Okay.
mode of living, wherein which
Right.
we are not being proactive, the passive mode of living, you can say
Right.
basically.
Right. Okay. Right.
Wherein which we are not being proactive about anything in general, basically.
Hmm.
So we hear stories about fishermen and even centurions basically who live 100 plus years, right? So they live like a very simplistic minimalism is an example of this, you can
Hmm.
say
Okay.
basically.
Okay.
Monkism, minimalism, not
Right.
not seeking pleasure or hedonistic pleasure particularly, etc.
Right. Right.
So that is like one mode of existence basically, okay, wherein which we try to derive pleasure from simple things like sunrise, sunset, etc.,
Hmm.
etc.
Hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Then one is the cheater mode of living, you can say basically. The cheater mode of living is kind of equivalent to the free rider mode of living, which is more dopaminergic than anything else basically, right?
Acha. Okay.
The
Right.
cheater mode of living, wherein which they care mainly about themselves only. In fact,
Right.
they care about themselves only basically, right?
Huh.
So the cheater mode of living leads to L side dopaminergic behavior basically.
Okay. Okay. Right.
The monkism mode of living is more passive, so it's like they don't happen to reality, reality happens to them basically. It's like that basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Correct. Correct.
they
Yeah.
they they have a mixture of stoicism and minimalism in the mix basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think it was Diogenes basically who said to Alexander. Alexander came and said to him, or Caesar. I think Alexander or Caesar, one of them.
Huh.
They came and said to Diogenes, a philosopher who used to live on the streets and things like that. He
Oh.
used to
Huh.
eat,
Right.
eat with dogs, etc. So the king came and said to him, like move, like what do you want basically? Like I am the king of such a big kingdom. That is kind of the implied subtext basically of his
Right.
behavior. And
Right.
then, do you want anything, do you need anything, etc. Okay. And the so-called Diogenes philosopher, he replied, I want you to move away from here so that like I'll get the sunlight back, you are blocking the sun.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Huh.
So this is into that minimalism mode of thinking or living, or that particular philosophy basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The other philosophy is like what is on display with respect to people like Vijay Mallya. Like Vijay Mallya is like a typical case like we can go to, right?
Right.
Extremely hedonistic and extremely cheating type of mindset basically,
Hmm.
and doesn't mind cheating, doesn't mind even publicly cheating, etc. Things like that.
Yeah.
Bernie Madoff was another example who was involved in that Ponzi scheme in the USA, right? Stock
Acha.
market Ponzi scheme.
Okay.
Elizabeth Holmes, basically, who was currently
Hmm.
like sentenced to prison, basically, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, these kind of examples,
Hmm.
and I think there were many public cases also. Ghislaine Maxwell and who was Ghislaine Maxwell's boyfriend. So there is this case we can
Okay.
refer to it. Jeffrey Epstein. I forgot the guy's name
Oh,
actually.
right. Right. Okay.
So Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, they had a like kind of a teenage sex racket kind of a thing, which
Right.
Bill Gates is also implicated in basically.
Right.
So, but Bill Gates is implicated in by association. Donald
Associate.
Trump was also friends with Jeffrey Epstein at some point in time, basically in the past.
Hmm. Hmm.
So these are like the hardcore cheaters, you can say basically.
Hmm.
And see, neurology exists in states, right?
Right.
So one example of a current cheater is Grant Cardone, basically, who just doesn't mind cheating publicly, basically.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Attai Lopez would be another example. Dan Lok would be another example, basically, of this
Right.
internet grifter slash cheaters, basically.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
this is like the cheater spectrum, you can say. So
Okay.
they
Okay.
don't mind cheating and conning people at all, basically,
Right.
right?
Right.
And like I told you, there is the minimalism, simplicity, that kind of spectrum and energy is there,
Hmm.
basically,
Correct.
right? And then there is the third kind of energy, basically. If a person wants to derive maximum utility in life,
Hmm.
then this kind of energy has to be mixed with ethics, basically. But to do it diligently over a huge span of time requires a lot of patience and efforts and dedication. So it's not easy, basically. So I'll give you an example of this type of energy. Steve Jobs, basically, the late
Hmm.
lamented Steve Jobs, is an example of this type of an energy.
Right.
So you might be knowing that Steve Jobs did not use Apple products or particularly the iPad himself, basically.
Actually, no, I didn't know this. Okay.
He tried to avoid it because he knew that this kind of multimedia devices are quite addictive, basically.
Right.
So hence he wanted to, keep his mind sharp and focused,
Hmm.
because ultimately screens are also hypernormal stimuli, na? Please understand.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Right.
Screens are giving us that, free information, you can say.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
boatloads of information is also hypernormal stimuli. Think about it. I
Yeah.
myself have been guilty of being addicted to information overload and overthinking and overanalysis, basically.
Right.
Although it led to good things later, basically. So this addiction is somewhat like a good addiction kind of a thing. But it
Right.
also implied that I struggled with weight loss, for example, because like deep
Hmm.
thinking requires sugar. Has sugar cravings associated with it, and so on and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
So in my 20s, I suffered with, you can say, I was not as fit as I naturally am, basically.
Right.
The athletic me in IIT Bombay or before that, basically. So
Right.
that self was not there when I was in this deep philosophical thinking zones, basically, like
Hmm.
that,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Right. Okay. Okay.
And of course, the three types of energies that I'm talking about right now, okay, the minimalistic, simplistic energy. I would even say Warren Buffett comes under the minimalistic, simplistic energy. But
Okay.
then Warren Buffett is an example of a good mix. He's an
Hmm.
example of a good mix of minimalism, simplicity, and also the active, productive energy that Steve Jobs displayed, basically,
Right.
as the active force. So active
Hmm.
force can be mischannelized, or you can say it can be channelized as a cheater also. A cheater can also be very active
Yeah.
and productive with respect to
Hmm.
whatever their goals are,
Hmm.
basically.
Right. Right.
For example, terrorists are apparently very diligent
Hmm.
because they believe in like that multiple wives after death and things like that, basically.
Right. Right.
Like they believe in uh, whatever their religion
Hmm.
preaches, essentially.
Yeah.
So there is this active energy, and
Hmm.
then there is this passive energy. Passive energy is related to minimalism and stoicism and things like that. Not
Correct.
exactly stoicism, you can say minimalism,
Hmm.
simplicity, that kind of
The
a thing,
passive, huh?
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in see, usually cheaters, okay, are not passive, or even if they are passive, they are kind of like lazy cheaters and hence harmless, basically. So
Right.
it's like those cheaters are like चार आने के cheaters. It's like that.
Right.
They,
Right.
they, they might steal one chocolate from one one
Hmm.
store or something like that. They are kind
Right.
of irrelevant type of harmless type of cheaters, basically, right? So it is the active and the intelligent that we need to worry about as far as cheating is concerned with respect to humanity in general.
Correct. Correct. True.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, with respect to the active people, like I gave examples of people whose neurology inclines towards cheating, basically,
Hmm.
and some people whose neurology inclines towards adding value to humanity and then earning their fair share of whatever they want to earn.
No.
One such example I can give is of Steve Jobs, basically. Okay, because
Hmm.
Steve Jobs wanted to create a legacy, basically,
Correct.
in whatever he wanted to do. Okay, there might be other common examples which I am avoiding, basically, because of some things I know, etc., and I don't want to be too controversial here on a public platform, basically.
Right.
So Another example of a, you can say, misdirected active energy is Adolf Hitler,
Hmm. Correct.
of a phenomena that involves misdirected energy, active energy, extremely active energy is Adolf
Right.
Hitler, right?
Right. Right.
So we cannot even say that Adolf Hitler was a cheater, because he might be doing some of the things that he did, maybe 10, 20, 30% of it for
Hmm.
personal gain. I mean to say monetary personal gain, but
Right.
mostly it was ideology. He was an ideologue.
Hmm.
So
Correct. Correct.
his, he did it for his ideology, basically, you can say
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
something like that. So he was
Right.
politically motivated.
Right.
So we can say that the will to power, will to attain power and retain power, basically,
Right.
is happening because of this political type of motivation. Okay, it
Hmm.
another thing is that it is happening because of cheating as a motivation. But
Hmm.
then if you have cheating as a motivation, then what I'm trying to say is you are still in the mediocre spectrum, basically,
Acha. Okay.
because cheating as a motivation is a mediocre motivation. Because if you are
Hmm.
a cheater, then you believe in hedonism and dopaminism. Please understand that.
Okay.
And you can see parallelism, because if you don't believe in hedonism and dopaminism,
Ah.
then
Ah.
you believe in either then you are lazy and minimalistic. See, I'm
Right.
not saying all of minimalism is laziness. I'm not saying that, okay,
Right.
basically.
Right. Right.
But it seems to be like involving the same activities, which are lack of activities, basically, like lack of active energy, you can say.
Right. Right.
So, so basically, the three tiers of existence are the
Hmm.
passive tier, the mediocre tier, and the
That's
active
okay.
tier. In the
Right.
active tier, you can be ethically in the active tier, you can be politically in the active tier because of some ideology, or you can be a cheater who is in the active tier. But then my corollary is that if you are a cheater, you will slip back into the mediocre tier soon enough, basically.
Right. Right.
That soon enough may be longer than expected because of the petroleum carbon pulse that we are in. For
Right.
example, like
Right.
if Dan Bilzerian's father was not a thief, then
Hmm.
he wouldn't have had so much money to spare, basically. So
Hmm. Hmm.
there would be no Dan Bilzerian, because he was just
Correct.
gifted money that was stolen by his dad, and
Correct.
he means these people are it's very well known, basically, about these people.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we can freely take these examples, basically. So
Right. Right.
when I talk about these people, nothing is controversial
Correct. Correct.
and nothing is political. Also, if I'm talking about Vijay Mallya's hedonism, it's not political, it's not controversial. If I'm talking about Adolf Hitler's
Yeah.
like way to political power, basically, it's not controversial. It's not political. Nothing. So
Hmm.
I am trying to take these examples just so that there is clarity, basically.
Hmm.
Because if I talk without examples, then there will be lack of clarity. So
Right.
I'm carefully trying to choose examples that are not really controversial, that are like
Right.
quite clear in
Unanimous.
the. Huh.
Unanimous opinion.
Yeah, exactly. It's like more than 95% sociologically unanimous opinion, basically.
Correct.
Like
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
there is not much controversy. Yeah, obviously there will be some 1 2 people in Dan Bilzerian's in group who may not agree, basically, because they have confirmation
Mhm.
bias and
Right.
you can say previous like things, sunken investment bias, etc. in
Yes.
him,
Yes.
so on and so forth,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So this is the point. These are the three types of energies, and let me kind of write them down also. There is the active energy, there is the mediocre energy,
Hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
and then there is the passive energy.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in case of active energy, there is R side behavior. So, ethically active, you can say. Okay. There is
Hmm.
L side behavior, hedonistic.
And I think one day we will expand on our side versus L side behavior for this
Yeah,
podcast also, right?
sure, 100%. That is like such a basic
Basic.
mental model that it will keep coming and people will keep asking questions and I'll have to do it. Like,
Yes.
and another thing is that I am also making asynchronous communication videos, right? There also I'll expand more, basically.
Right.
So,
Right.
so apart from the knowledge documentation in the podcast, there is other things also happening, basically.
Right.
Yeah. And then there is like this power hungry behavior, basically.
Or
Political.
ideologue. ideology.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a bit of overlap and stuff, right? Because
See,
for the person,
everything has overlap basically. It's
right.
never that okay. Somebody like it doesn't mean that Steve Jobs never ate ice cream.
Mhm.
That's not true basically. Okay,
Right, right,
so there is going to be overlap everywhere, right?
right, right.
So when we say some person is, let's say a man is R2, doesn't mean that he is not L2. It just means that he is
Mm.
predominantly R2.
Predominantly art.
Yeah. So there is obviously always going to be overlap basically. Correct?
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So hedonistic behavior, ethically active behavior, and power hungry ideological behavior. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So in the uh, spectrum of mediocrity also, you can say it is kind of similar. There are ethically mediocre people, matlab mediocre people who are
Hmm.
ethical. There are
Correct.
mediocre people who are also power hungry, but they are not effective. That's why they are not successful.
Right.
And there are mediocre people that are hedonistic also, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. And passive people are there. Passive people are usually not power hungry.
Hmm.
They are usually less hedonistic
Hmm.
because they are passive. Like
Yeah.
laziness, sloth. Their sin is sloth, basically.
Hmm. Correct.
Out of the seven deadly sins, their sin is sloth, you can
Hmm.
say. Okay.
Hmm.
And they are generally more towards the ethical side, generally speaking.
Right.
More towards the ethical side. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So this is like one classification that we can derive from this.
Hmm.
Very important to note the this particular classification. And of course it's a spectrum, so there will be all kinds of combinations in between also. But we humans can't talk about 100 type of categories, right? So
Ah,
it's better to classify into the three primary basically, which
right.
pretty much covers most of the spectrum basically.
Right.
It's like that. Okay, let's go on to
Hmm.
the first mental model of ethics. Like I used to bunk IIT Bombay classes to think about this, and like this is something that I came up with basically
Okay.
at that point in time, some 10 years ago.
Okay.
So over 10 years ago actually. So this
Right.
is what I call as the deservance obtenance model basically. Okay. And
Okay.
let me also tell you that all models are not necessarily very accurate or things like that. Models built on top of each other, and
Hmm.
no model of reality is actual reality basically, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So reality is completely like the map is not the territory.
Hmm.
Map is an approximation of the territory.
Exactly.
So we seek to develop mental models that
Hmm.
are simple enough to be able to be able to be understood by human beings conversing with each other, because human beings, as we know, have limited intellectual bandwidth.
Right.
Cache memory is limited, like even the storage is limited and things like that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And limited brain processing power. So
Hmm.
mental models are just simplifications of reality in order for us human beings to derive heuristics from them, basically, or decision making prowess
Correct.
from them.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
So on the x-axis, I am plotting what I call as deservance.
Okay. Deserving.
Deservance. I used to call it
Yeah.
back in the day, or if there is some old literature that I have written, it will be called as HD, happiness deserved, basically.
Acha. Okay.
The word eudaimonia is a better word compared to happiness because, like we mentioned in one of the earlier pods, happiness doesn't really cover everything, basically. So, wholeness or eudaimonia is a better word, basically,
Okay.
because somebody can feel good even if they are suffering. For
Acha.
example, a mother suffers a lot during childbirth,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that that woman would not like to have the child.
Correct. Yeah.
So some suffering is necessary, and some suffering is very important for evolution of that
Right.
particular human, of that particular community, of that particular species, etc. So
Right. Okay.
when we talk about happiness, it kind of tends to imply lack of suffering, basically. So
Okay.
the necessary and good part of suffering is kind of not captured. It is maybe not captured in eudaimonia also. That's why wholeness and eudaimonia make more sense, basically. Okay.
Hmm. Okay.
That's why later I abandoned this terminology of happiness deserved, and I stuck with deservance, basically. Okay.
Right. Right.
And on the y axis, we are plotting what we can call as obtenance. So these may not be English words, but they should be. They are very important, basically.
Hmm.
And even if they are not English words, I'm going to use them basically. I'll also explain what they mean. So deservance is like human beings are living life on planet Earth, and if we have a simplistic model that, let's say, on an island, let's say a group of 100 humans is living, okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
so they are deriving from the human economy, right? They are also deriving from ecology, but they are deriving also from the human economy. Meaning, let's say there might be a carpenter who is good with wood and wood carpentry skills, basically, right? So
Correct.
he might be making the furniture for the entire group of 100 people. There
Hmm.
might be one or two carpenters. There might be one or two fishermen who are fishing for most of the people. There might be one or two farmers that are farming.
Right.
There might be one or two doctors that are,
Hmm.
treating patients and things like that, basically, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So the point over here is whatever they are contributing back to the economy. This is like a simplistic 101 kind of model, basically, okay?
Right.
And hence it is less accurate than subsequent models.
Right.
But
Okay.
we need to go through it to be able to refer back to it when necessary, basically. It's
Okay.
like that.
Right.
So whoever is contributing however much, basically, they
Huh.
should obtain in that proportion, right?
Okay. Right. Right. Huh.
So that is the simple model.
Okay.
So you start at 0, 0, you are born naked,
Hmm.
basically,
Hmm.
or you should be in this model, you should be born naked. In the real world, this does not happen because of
Right.
inheritance and things like that, at least
Correct.
as of
Correct.
2023.
Correct.
So what happens is like you are supposed to go along this line, which is supposed to be the deservance equal to obtainance line, D
Hmm.
equal to
Hmm.
O, or in my
Hmm.
earlier literature, it is called as HD equal to HO line.
Right.
So this is the 45-degree line, correct?
Yeah.
So you have to, on
Equal
an
to.
average,
Yeah.
move
Hmm.
along this line basically. Makes sense, no? So
Yeah.
sometimes you might go above and sometimes you might go below like this. So
Hmm.
your motion on this line may not be exact. It might be roughly along that trajectory.
Hmm. Right.
When I used to prepare for my undergraduate entrance exam, IIT JEE,
Huh.
like at that point in time, a lot of my study preparation time was wasted or slash invested in
Right.
trying to understand this particular model because
Acha.
I used to see poor people and they did not used to have books to study.
Hmm.
So it
Right.
also happened that sometimes I went ahead and gave them my book. Now I did not have books to study.
Hmm.
Textbooks.
Okay.
I'm talking about textbooks, not
Correct.
notebooks, basically.
Correct.
I tried to become a library and like share textbooks and things like that. But then
Acha.
it was leading to inefficiency. And then I was thinking that in the country there would be so many poor people, right?
Hmm.
So how do I like my thing was I want to win ethically. I don't want to win non-ethically.
Right. Right.
So that because of that, this obsessive compulsiveness came in basically, right?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
The obsessive compulsiveness of developing models of ethics basically.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
And this has been my OCD for the longest of time.
Acha.
Like
Okay.
so
Specifically regarding ethics, when you say the
specifically
OCD,
regarding
acha.
ethics, because see, winning is related to ethics. Na, you can think like you
Hmm.
can win by cheating also, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
But why it is wrong, basically, that is what we are mathematically trying to prove. Not like
Right.
heuristically or just like okay, it's wrong because religion says it's wrong, because
Right.
mother and
Right.
father says it's wrong. No. Why mathematically it is wrong for you as well as humanity, that is what we are trying to prove
Hmm.
here.
Okay.
And we are slowly headed towards that, basically. All right.
Right. Okay. Okay. Okay.
So there, during my undergrad preparation, then
Hmm.
I concluded that oh, this cannot go on. I cannot just give my books around town basically and then
Right.
have no. And remember that this is pre-internet basically. There was no
Right.
internet or
Right.
studying
Okay.
from the internet. People who are born into the internet generation wouldn't remember this. So before the
Right.
internet, books like hard copy books were like the thing basically. There was no
Right. Yeah.
Kindle. There were no there is no concept of ebooks and things like that basically.
Right. So no other sources to learn. Yeah.
Like
Pretty much the
the
books.
knowledge is encapsulated in print media, which is like hard copy books. So you cannot learn and revise unless you have that hard copy book with you. Okay, you can
Correct.
have your notes. Sometimes notes also I'm lending out and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I'm lending out my time, whatever I have learned, I'm teaching others and things like that. Then finally it dawned upon me that this cannot go on. Then this will make sure that my grades are suffering basically with respect to that particular entrance exam. Because like if this is going to go on, then there is no
Right.
end to it, na? And still I am not being able to solve the entire world's problem because
Hmm.
in my vicinity, in my city, I am lending out books, study material and things like that. What about people who are not there in my city?
Hmm.
So then I thought that it is a phase of my life when I'm crossing this HD equal to HO line and I'm going above. Are you getting it?
Okay, okay.
I'm going above like this.
Hmm.
So then I thought that okay, later I have to contribute back to society basically, and then I have to go below. And then on an
Right,
average, like I will be over here basically along the HD equal to HO line. Basically.
right, right.
This is a very good model.
Hmm.
Insofar as it also explains things like this. Like some people are, let's say, born. Some people are born at a higher
Hmm.
level. Let's say here they are born with higher obtainance.
Okay.
Like for example, billionaires' children. For example,
Right.
assuming the billionaire is going to pass on the wealth in
Money
inheritance.
to harm.
Right?
Right,
Some billionaires don't do that, like Warren Buffett, etc. They pass
right,
on lesser amount of wealth rather than a lot of wealth, basically.
right,
Okay?
right, right.
But assuming, okay, that the wealth has been inherited, so billionaires' children come over here, like they already have a
Hmm.
lot of obtainance, so
Correct.
they kind of need to go like this, and then along the trajectory, basically,
Okay, okay.
right? Means they need
Hmm.
to sacrifice a lot and they need to do a lot for humanity, basically, which
Hmm. Hmm.
roughly
Hmm.
makes sense. Roughly, it makes sense. Okay,
Right.
if you think deeply about this model,
Hmm.
we will come to realize that actually this deservance is what it's like basically the integration of total good acts
Okay.
for humanity that you have
Right.
done with respect to time whole divided by the time basically. So it is like the net summation of the good act basically. Like people who are familiar with integration can
Okay.
understand
Okay.
this. Otherwise it's summation of good acts,
Hmm.
good deeds you can say.
Right.
Summation of good deeds. Okay. And obtainance is what?
Right.
The integration of whatever you have obtained. Okay. So as of now, here let's limit
Hmm.
ourselves to resources. Okay. So obtained resources, which is
Okay.
to say wealth or money, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although it can be argued that is a combination of wealth, money, plus status, power, plus your own personal
Hmm.
psychology, etc., etc. Okay. But
Right.
as of now, let's
Right.
keep it simple and let's say resources plus power.
Okay.
Yeah, dt whole divided by
Yeah.
total time t, or again you can put it as a
Right.
summation basically. So
Right.
thinking deeply about this, it will be implied that this is what we mean when we say deservance and obtainance basically, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have published some articles about this, so I'll be like linking it below this podcast basically. Yeah, blog articles and blog posts regarding deservance and obtainance and so on and so forth. All right.
Right.
So this
Okay.
is a model that really explained a lot basically. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So here, let us say from age means this particular model, like it really puts things in perspective basically. So for example, a billionaire's son, when for the first time, like the Gautam Buddha, right?
Hmm.
Gautam Buddha
Hmm.
realized that he was in inside a I think he was a prince, right? Gautam
Yeah.
Buddha, and
Yeah.
later
Yeah.
later he became the Buddha, right? So
Correct.
he realized that his obtainance is too high already and there is a lot
Hmm.
of suffering
Correct.
in the external world.
Correct.
So he went in this direction, wherein which he reduced his obtainance and increased his
Hmm.
deservance, basically.
Hmm.
So you can see that this is the direction for the
For the saint. Okay.
saints of the world, basically.
Hmm.
Reducing their obtainance and increasing their
Right.
deservance, basically.
Deservance. Right. Right.
Right? And if let us say your deservance is low, let's say you commit a crime, okay?
Hmm.
So your deservance has become low now, correct?
Yeah.
If you commit a crime, your deservance has
So
become
the
low.
correct. Correct.
Your obtainance should also become low. So this is a direction for criminals.
Hmm. Hmm. Right.
Okay.
Hmm.
So now you can kind of see R side behavior, L side behavior basically. This is the
Hmm. Hmm.
central line. All this is kind of going to be R side behavior.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All this is going to be kind of L side behavior. So you can see that lot of things correlate basically, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So like again, I'll repeat. This is all going to be kind of R side behavior here, here.
Right. Right.
Here
More
we are going to
deserving.
see
Yeah.
kind of R side behavior basically, right?
Hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah.
And here we are going to see L side behavior. I'll erase these things later, but I'm
Hmm.
just in order to highlight it properly. Here we are going to see L side behavior. Make sense?
Right, right, right. So I'm just trying to think of all the quadrants. Like if we see the criminals quadrant, उसमें भी our side behavior है because
Because
that is a little tricky
they
to
committed
grasp.
crime. They committed crime basically, but
Right,
they
but
are now suffering
suffering
also.
disproportionately high
Yeah,
compared to this thing,
compared to
right?
what they should basically.
Right,
You can.
right. Hmm, 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 hmm. And on the
Correct.
flip side, in the top right quadrant, you'll have your again billionaires' children who maybe actually do some work also, like maybe Ambani's kid or something,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Who actually? But then whether the work is proportional or not, we don't know
Hmm.
basically compared to
Correct,
what
correct,
they have
exactly.
received.
So the
Basically.
octane would be very high compared to the deservings.
Exactly. And
Okay.
I'll give a mathematical formula also later. Like,
Okay.
of course, these models I myself think that these are not exact models. These are like
Hmm.
things that are helping us think better, basically,
Right, correct, correct.
and helping us reach where we want to actually reach, basically. Okay.
Right, right,
Yeah. So here is the cheaters. This is the direction for the cheaters.
right, right. Yeah.
Cheaters, free riders.
Hmm.
Exactly in the L side direction, you can see.
Yeah.
So the central direction is this. HT
Correct.
equal to HO direction is where we should head towards, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you are doing more deserving activities, then you are
Hmm.
saintly.
Right.
You are moving towards saintism, like being a saint.
Huh.
Even though saintism may not be a word, I'm just saying it. You are
Huh.
moving towards that. Okay.
Right. Right.
When you are moving here, then you are like a cheater, basically. You are a free rider. You
Hmm.
are abusing whatever you have. Like, for example, Dan
Right.
Bilzerian, Vijay Mallya, etc. Basically.
Right. Right.
Criminals,
Yeah.
and in criminals also L side, R side,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
here also, and here this is like the active energy basically.
Correct. Yeah. Active. Huh. Correct.
So most of the see, most one way of saying what should human life be is, or what should the aim of human life be, because this was also related to the existential crisis that I faced when I was in undergrad, basically, as to what
Okay.
to do with my life, because placements are coming and
Huh.
I don't really seem to like working for somebody and things like that. So what
Right.
kind of a job should I take or not take, or I ended up not working for anybody, thankfully, but
Right. Right.
I'm just saying basically. So
Right.
so it was an existential crisis on a deadline, basically.
Right. Right.
I had to mentally model very fast, basically. Okay.
Right. Right. Okay.
But still, I had a few years, so I did as
Huh.
good a job as I could, basically,
Right.
sacrificing my health and fitness and things like that. But anyway, it happened for a reason, and now we are documenting it over here. All
Right.
right. So let's see this. So if you think about it, we here discussed about these type of people, right?
Correct. Yeah. Three
Right.
layers and huh. Yeah.
Correct. So you can see that the active slash ethical people, active people who are also ethical,
Hmm.
will more or less be here.
On the line. Yeah.
Yeah. Because Steve Jobs also obtained a lot. Think.
Hmm.
Not
Correct.
only did he deserve a lot, he also obtained a lot.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett,
Hmm.
yes, something like that.
Yeah.
Now, Warren Buffett is a very peculiar case. I would like to case study him later in detail in one of the podcasts. Okay. After we develop all these mental models and things like that.
Right.
But Warren Buffett didn't really contribute with his work. He contributed
Hmm.
literally with his donation. Please understand that.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
So, allocating capital is not really creating any value, right?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
stock doesn't know who owns it. The stock just goes up and down.
Okay.
the
Okay.
stock the stock just represents demand and supply, right?
Right. I guess this can be kind of fleshed out and discussed. Yeah, a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, like you said.
in
Like you
extreme
said.
amount
Huh?
of detail
Then
later.
it opens up questions like what exactly is investing and the overall
Yes,
uh,
yes, yes.
value add by investing, trading. I mean, all of
Correct,
them
correct,
differently
correct.
also.
I
Whether
will
there's
give you a short answer. There is no value add in trading and
but what
investing.
about in long term investing? Not even that.
No, no. There is value add in so far as whatever the company is doing, whatever activity the company is doing,
Uh,
it is doing basically, right?
correct.
So,
Huh.
insofar as operations of companies are concerned, there might be a value add basically, okay?
Huh. Huh. Okay.
But the operation of the company doesn't know who owns the company. Please understand that. basically.
Correct. Yeah,
So
yeah.
investing in that company in order to gain a profit at a later point in time is
Hmm.
not necessarily value add, basically. So I'll give
Hmm.
you an example. Warren Buffett owns Coca-Cola and has owned
Correct.
Coca-Cola for a long amount of time. But
Correct.
even if he had not owned Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola company would have kept on destructing Earth as it did basically by dopaminergic activity. So
Right.
like Coca-Cola is a very bad example because it takes the planet in this kind of trajectory basically in the hypernormal
Correct.
stimuli trajectory because of sugar.
Right.
Let's take a better example basically. Okay.
That Warren Buffett only invested in, or
No,
just in general, or anything.
anything else is also
You
fine
can think of
basically.
Apple also, maybe like the big investors of Apple.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Yeah.
Apple or
Okay. Yeah.
Chennai, or
Berkshire
maybe, but
apparently is also
no, you're
big
right.
investor in Apple. Yeah.
But yeah, like Apple also probably does have screens and dopamine. I mean,
Yeah. So see, nothing is going to be devoid of dopaminism. Let's understand that
right.
basically. Nothing is going to be totally devoid of dopaminism, basically, right? So we are also disseminating this information on screens only ultimately. So
Hmm.
so it's like nothing is going to be devoid of dopaminism. It's like the ratio and proportion. That's the
Right.
key funda here. And if you
Right.
remember, I hinted at it: 95% efforts and 5% dopaminism.
Correct.
That seems to be the correct kind of ratio and proportion in order to maximize the utility out of human life as well as out of humanity in general. Apple
Right.
is a good example. Let's take the example of Apple. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Warren Buffett invested in Apple, and let's assume that Apple is doing good, net good for the world. Basically, let's
Right.
ignore the horror stories on in China manufacturing and things like that. People commit
Right.
like okay, I don't want to go there right now. Let's
Right.
assume that the net like Apple is doing net good for humanity basically, even though their
Hmm.
products are overpriced. And one case I discussed like about the way in which they are forcefully trying to maintain their moat and things like that. Let's not go deep into it right now, but let's just assume that because of
Right.
the iPads and all these things that we have available to us, because of the screens that we have available to us, there is net benefit, and Steve Jobs
Right.
was instrumental in creating that benefit. Let's assume that
Right.
for this particular discussion. Okay, we'll not
Right.
question that assumption right now basically. All
Correct.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the company Apple and its activities may be beneficial for the world.
Hmm.
But even if Warren Buffett had not invested in the company Apple and its activities,
Hmm.
then also the company Apple and its activities would have been equally beneficial for the world.
Correct. I guess that's what it comes
So the
down to, right?
act
What's
of
the
Warren Buffett
alternative?
investing into Apple for
Did
the
not
sake of
change.
gaining monetary or like resourceful benefit out of it at a
Hmm.
later stage, basically, is
Hmm.
not doing anything added at the marginal level for the world, basically, right? So
Hmm.
whatever was going to happen via that company was going to happen anyway.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
There is a small error in what I am saying right now, but
Right.
that error is so small that I want to let that error be there. See, because Warren Buffett invested in Apple, there was a delta X increase of the stock price because he inflated the
Correct.
demand. Because of
Correct.
that, some other people invested also, basically, because of the
Correct.
delta
Correct.
X inflated demand, etc. And hence, it helped Apple do what it is doing. But this error, the error caused because of the second statement that I said, is so small that it is ignorable for the purpose of
Yeah,
the discussion.
even my mind was going in that direction only, and then I was thinking that probably like the bigger companies, the delta is smaller. Probably if you're investing in the early stages, you can still say that I am instrumental in helping the company
Then
its
again, see,
operations.
you don't know what's going to happen with the company, even though you might have predicted. And even
Right.
if you do know, then the entrepreneurs did it, no? Whatever they
Hmm.
did, or the entrepreneurs
Right.
did it, right?
But could be like
So
an enabling function, right? Like at least
yeah,
I help the entrepreneurs.
yes, but I would rather say that that delta is still small, basically,
Okay. Right.
because if not one investor, another investor does come in if the product, service, and the entrepreneur and the team is good enough.
Correct. That's true. That's true. So
That's the thing over here.
it's inevitable that something worth creating will find
Will get will
will
get
get
like those niches will get filled, basically. That's the thing.
correct. So the only way you can as an investor make a do or die difference is if otherwise if not for Warren Buffett, nobody, or if not for that
Yes,
investor, nobody else would have
exactly well
invested.
said.
But
Exactly
then the
well said.
product can't be that good anyway. Like if that's the case, like why
No,
would
there
like
are some things like cancer research, for example, basically. Then they
right.
they come in the domain of charity, wherein profitability may not be the main criteria, basically.
Hmm. Right.
Education industry and healthcare industry are examples of these, basically.
Okay.
And the
Right.
space tech industry is like kind of uh, we can just ignore the space tech industry because anyway it's going to die. It's going to dopaminergically crash basically because
Right.
how are we going to fly out to Mars when petroleum itself is going to go extinct?
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
can't fly on Mars with electric batteries, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that part of the human attempt is like kind of we can ignore basically. So because since petroleum is going to go extinct, even if the first fleet actually reaches Mars, which itself is physically very difficult according to
Right.
physics, even
Right.
if the first fleet does reach Mars, basically, okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
then the second fleet won't, and the first fleet will die after a while.
Hmm. Hmm. So fleets need to keep going anyway. Yeah.
No, no, say again, I did not get that.
No,
I didn't
fleets
hear
need
that.
to keep going, right? Because the
Yeah,
resources have to
yeah. In
keep.
order to like we inhabit Mars basically, and in order to
Right.
occupy it, the multiple fleets need to go, right? At least thousands.
Oh yeah, actually, there needs to be a continual
Correct,
transport of resources because
correct, correct,
everything you won't get there. Oh, yeah. Right.
correct. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a redundant plan, basically. That's like a wasteful plan, you can say.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And similarly, space tech. If somebody has that deep of a vision, they'll understand. Once they understand the like human beings are ignorant about the petroleum bonus and the energy bonus that they are living with, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
All this prosperity that we see around us is
Hmm.
just mainly because of the energy luck that we find ourselves in at
Yes.
this point in history, at this
Yes.
point in human history.
Okay. Okay.
So once the energy goes, all this prosperity is going to go down.
Right.
So we have to do as much work which is long term and sustainable as we can while the prosperity lasts, basically.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And
Correct.
hence it is important to take bets that are going to be long term beneficial for humanity and ignore things that are anyway not going to be long term beneficial for humanity, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't want to comment about certain things right now, basically. And
Right.
I don't
Right.
want to make this more controversial than necessary because people's egos and minds and their money is invested somewhere basically, and
Right. Right.
humans suffer from the confirmation bias basically. So
Correct.
they try to reject new information even if the new information is correct,
Right. Right.
technically correct, and we all need to really work hard to overcome our own like previous confirmation biases basically. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now coming back to the point. Now this is a model that really explains things out basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Good. And the active people are as far away from the origin as they can be. Correct, no?
Hmm. Yeah, correct.
That
They're
the
moving
active efficient
faster.
people. Yeah,
Yes,
because they are moving faster and more
faster.
efficiently.
Yes,
And
yes.
you can say the mediocre people in all the domains are closer to the origin, basically.
Right, correct.
So mediocre cheaters are closer to the origin, mediocre criminals are closer to the origin, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mediocre people are closer to the origin, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the most lazy of humans will be at the origin basically. You
Hmm.
can, they are not moving anywhere, like
Right, right.
they are just a statue or something like that basically.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. So efficiency gets you away from the origin, you can say.
yeah.
Efficiency of anything,
Efficiency gets, yeah, makes you
like
move faster.
if you are an efficient criminal, then you should be like extremely efficiently put into jail basically, and
Right,
there
yeah.
will be extremely efficient measures that ensure that you remain in jail also.
Right.
It's like that. If you are an
Correct.
efficient cheater, then you will go there, but actually you would deserve to be here, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
It's like that. So you can say on this particular diagram, the dopaminergic crash looks like this, basically.
Yes,
So
yes.
people try to go in this direction, but kind of tend or end up going in this particular direction, like this,
Right, right.
right? And not only people, companies also, right? A company
Hmm.
that is like push marketing a lot basically. See, in
Okay.
marketing
Hmm.
should be more about just communicating that this is what we have. See, Apple is not calling anybody and saying that okay, buy our product. No, they are just putting their
Hmm.
product out there for the world to
Hmm.
see.
Right.
So the best kind of marketing is just branding,
Hmm. Right,
right? So we are
right.
just putting ourselves out there and the world will choose basically whether they want to work with us or not.
Correct.
So inbound sales process is the only thing that should actually exist basically.
Right. Okay. Right.
And sales process should just help or enable the potential customers
Hmm.
to kind of choose amongst the various different products and services available basically. So
Right.
if I don't know what iPad to buy, then
Hmm.
maybe the Apple service person can help me, something like that
Correct.
basically. But people and companies who are having to force sell their product are really
Yeah.
not having a lot of core value in the product basically,
Correct. Yeah. True.
right?
Yeah.
So this is one model of ethics that we have documented over here. All right.
Hmm.
So it is a dilemma. Let's continue for some time on this model basically. Okay,
Yes.
it is a dilemma as to where to put the power hungry people basically. Okay,
Okay.
so because
Acha.
see these are cheaters basically, but power hungry people may not be power hungry for the want of cheating, you can say,
Correct. Correct.
but their behavior is enough similar to the power hungry, like to the cheaters behavior, that we can put them over here.
Correct. Because from their perspective, they'll think that they are deserving, that they are doing good to the world, right? So in
Yes,
their mind,
they will,
um,
in their mind they will think that they should be here,
correct. Correct. Yeah.
but then they are actually here because they are not doing good to the world basically.
Hmm. Correct.
And then there is a very interesting observation about intentionality that comes in over here, which we
Yeah.
will
Yeah. That's what,
which we
uh,
will develop in one of the subsequent
correct.
ethical models basically.
But
Okay.
at least I think initially, I don't remember if we clarified on this podcast, but at least like you do, and even I do believe that objective reality exists sociologically also. That like we're not going with the whole perception is everything sort of a
Yes,
model
yes, yes.
beyond a point, right?
Objective
So
reality. So sociologically, objective reality
hmm,
does exist. So
does
that is
exist
the,
now. So that
and
we are
we are even like trying to mathematically prove it. So
exactly, yeah. So
that's what where we are headed basically in the
correct,
subsequent discussion. Yeah. Okay.
right?
So one formula I would like to write over here: how to know how much a person deserves. So a person's deservance basically.
Hmm,
Okay, deservance of the ith individual or deservance of one person is going to be what, like whatever contribution he has done. Okay,
hmm, hmm.
whatever contribution he has done upon summation of contributions, or rather even I would say how much a person should obtain would be a better way of putting this. So what
Okay,
should be a person's obtainance basically. So
okay,
contribution by that person divided by summation of all the contributions by all human individuals into, you can say, something like the GDP of the world.
okay. So I'm saying,
Yeah.
GVM contribution by that person. What
So
is the
in ratio and
denominator again?
proportion, you can just say the ratio and proportion basically.
Right,
Like
right,
there is a pie, and that pie is
ah,
being distributed in
right,
the ratio and proportion of the contribution of that individual compared to all other individuals basically. Okay.
right, right. Makes
Now
sense. Yeah.
now this is also not an exact thing, because some people will be like from $10,000 they can get X amount of happiness, and some people will be like from $10,000 because of their various ET graph situations they will get
Right.
Y amount of happiness, etc., and Y might be negative also basically, right?
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
So here we are not talking about that. Here we are not talking about converting wealth or money, which is a representation of wealth. We are
Hmm.
not talking about converting that to what happens with the ET graph. Okay.
Okay,
We
okay.
are just talking about purely the distribution of money,
Right.
basically.
Sure, sure.
So even though this formula has inadequacies, it is still worth mentioning,
Hmm,
basically.
hmm.
So a simple way to write this would be obtainance of the ith individual. So this is the x equal to y line, x equal to y line, right?
Yeah,
Y is equal to x, or the
yeah.
deservance is equal to obtainance
Correct,
line basically.
correct,
So
correct.
obtainance of the ith individual should be deservance of the ith individual, okay,
Hmm.
divided by summation of deservance of all individuals basically into GDP.
Right, right. Yes.
So this kind of makes sense basically.
Hmm.
All right. And there is a parallel formula which I used to document and write a lot few years ago. So this
Right,
is the formula for what should be considered by a given human individual as their success, psychologically speaking. Okay. So
right. Okay.
success should be equal to difference made. Okay, like the difference between the ending point and the starting point, or you can say the path length traveled. Okay,
Right.
divided by base resources.
Hmm. Right.
divided by base
Yes,
resources.
yes, yes.
Okay. Base resources minus hurdles, mainly
Hmm.
due to bad luck.
Yes. Okay.
So
Okay.
let's try to understand this. Like
Hmm.
if let us say, uh, I usually give this example. If there is a 10 feet tall basketball player, okay,
Hmm.
and he dunks basically 10 times in a row. So his success will be, what is the difference made? 10 out of, like,
Then
he
that's
he dunked 10 times. So like kind of the worldly success is 10. Okay. And what were his base resources? The height was the base resource, right? Now some people may argue that, oh, in basketball, like even if you are not that tall, then it doesn't make a difference. We are assuming that it makes a difference. We are
right.
assuming that the game of basketball is easier for taller people. That is the
Right.
fundamental assumption in this example,
Right.
basically.
Right.
Okay. Or you can take volleyball for that matter, and
Right.
like replace basket throws by smashes, basically. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So let's say difference made is 10. Base resources are his height, which is 10. And did he face any hurdles? Like, was there any like knee surgery or something like that? Let's assume zero.
Hmm.
So let's assume for simplicity. Okay.
Right.
So his success of that individual is going to be example. Okay. Success
Hmm.
is going to be what? 10 divided by 10
One.
minus 0, which is 1.
One.
Now, if the same feat is done by a 5 feet tall basketball player, there can be a 5 feet tall basketball player, right?
Right. Yeah.
So let's say he dunks 10 times. So it
Hmm.
will be 10. Base resources were his height, which
Right.
is only 5, basically. Minus, again, he also did not have any hurdles. Let's assume 0.
Yes.
Okay. So the answer is 2.
Yeah.
Now, if this is done by somebody who does not have legs, there are
Hmm.
people who don't have legs because of various reasons.
Right.
So their success will be 10. Yeah, this will be S1, S2, let's say S3,
That's
10.
good.
And let's say people who don't have legs, their, let's say, height is, you can say, 3 feet, something like that. Okay.
Hmm.
Let's assume 3 feet. And because they don't have legs, they suffered a lot of hurdles also. So you can say
Right.
minus 2 because of the hurdles, basically. Let's
Right.
assume. Okay. So let's assume that this doesn't go negative or something like that. Let's keep it
Hmm.
simple. Like we have to take the essence of the formula rather than like
Correct. Uh,
screwing with it mathematically. Basically, I know some
right.
people will tend to do that. Okay,
Right.
I'm just trying to illustrate something over here, and I already said that this is not exact. That's why
Correct.
like I have evolved the mental models, but this is something
Correct.
that I used to think about basically. All right.
Right.
So we have
Okay.
10. So in short, what are we talking about? Greater is the path length traveled or the difference made.
Hmm.
Greater is the success.
Correct.
Path length travel. Okay. And it is divided by base resources
Yeah.
minus hurdle. So let's
Correct.
take the example of Donald Trump basically. Okay. Let's assume that his father, or you can take the example of Ambani basically, but Donald Trump is better for us.
Okay.
Okay. So let's take the example of Donald Trump. Let's assume that his father grew their wealth from 10 to, let us say, 1 million. Let's assume 1 million for a moment. I know it's more than that, but
Right.
let's assume 1 million for a moment, basically. Okay. So 10 to 10 raised to 6. Let's assume that he had $10, which is also wrong actually. But let's assume just for the example, basically. Okay.
Mhm.
Then the success of the father is what difference made, which is 10 raised to 6 minus 10 divided by base resources 10, right?
Correct.
Now let's assume that Donald Trump, okay, so this like is approximately equal to, you can say, 10 raised to 5.
Yeah.
Approximately. It's 10 raised to 5 minus 1, which is again approximately 10 raised to 5.
10 is 5. Correct.
Yeah. So this is success of the father, 10 raised to 5. Now
Hmm.
let's assume that Donald Trump 100x, like from $1 million, he created an empire of $100 million. Okay. Now let's
Hmm.
look at the success of Donald Trump. Okay. The success of the son, Donald Trump, is going to be equal to, let's say, $100 million. So 10 raised to 8. Yeah. 10 raised
Yeah.
to 8
Minus. Huh.
minus he was given 10 raised to 6, $1 million he was given basically
Correct. Correct.
upon 10 raised to 6.
Correct.
Okay. So the value comes out to be approximately 100 only.
Hmm.
So this formula does put things in perspective, kind of a thing basically.
Correct. Correct.
So, in absolute terms, his father did not succeed much.
Hmm.
But
Correct.
according to the true definition of success, or what we are portraying to be the
Hmm.
true definition of success, his
Hmm.
father succeeded thousand times more than he did,
More
basically.
than, yeah.
And here also, this also puts things in perspective.
Hmm.
The 10 feet tall basketball player will be glorified by the world.
Yes.
Donald Trump might be glorified by the
Yes.
business community for going, like adding like 99 million to his net portfolio.
Yes.
Okay. And then there is this hurdles component or bad luck component also, basically. So if you have got more bad luck, then
Hmm.
lesser value of success seems more, basically. For example,
Correct. 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 But
you
that's
can,
not how we intuit. That's not how we judge people at all. Like, I mean, in
but that is
today's
so
world,
wrong. That is so
yeah,
wrong,
it's
right?
so
That's
wrong,
why
right? Yeah.
humanity is kind of stupid, basically. You
Hmm.
can see. Like,
That's
I'm not
true.
dissing humanity, so as to say, basically, but
Correct. Correct.
you can see that because of various different cognitive biases and because of the lack of brain power that we have, like
Hmm.
humanity is kind of stupid, basically, like
Hmm.
without choice. And this
Hmm.
is absolutely now not how we look at people's success. Absolutely
Correct.
not. We
Absolutely
just
not.
look at the world just looks at the absolute value of success,
Yes.
basically.
Yes. True. True. True.
But actually, this makes more sense. Even
Hmm.
though we can screw around with the formula and
Hmm.
point out mathematical inaccuracies and things like that, I know I am aware about these things, but I am
Correct.
just giving like a heuristic type of a formula which we
Yes.
can mess around and play with and make better and things like that in
Yes.
order
Yes.
to in order to understand that this is how success should be interpreted. And any
Hmm.
mature person should actually interpret success like this.
Yes. Yes.
Any mature individual who actually thinks deeply should
Hmm.
interpret success like this, basically. Make sense?
Hmm. Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Correct. So this
Yeah.
is something that I wanted to document. So the next model of ethics, I'm going to write a book on this.
Hmm.
I call that as the model of the maximally moral lane. So this is like the HDHO graph or the deservance obtainance graph.
Correct.
Okay. So this is like model one, you can say.
Hmm.
Model one. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
And some things associated with model one, like some mathematical
Yeah.
definitions associated with model one. So this
Yes.
is the second model,
Hmm.
which I call as the maximally moral lane.
Maximally moral
Maximally moral lane.
lane. Okay.
Okay, so if we are going to project ethics model 2 on model 1, then in that particular case, we would say that this is the maximally moral lane, the HDHO line. This
Yes.
is the
Yes.
maximally moral lane, basically.
Yeah.
So, as to say, I'm just giving some context, basically. I'll explain further, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, before we go on to model 2, let's kind of see what is like the drawback of model 1. Okay.
Hmm.
Now,
Okay.
this particular drawback is associated with what we as humans call as comparisonitis, basically, or the phenomena of
Hmm.
us feeling sad just because somebody else has more.
So is that why you defined success also here? The how success should be measured, because there also that comparisonitis
Comparisonitis
is a
plays
huge
a
problem
huge
now.
role in human life, basically. So we are going to talk more about that now. Comparisonitis.
Yeah.
Strangely, it includes one itis in it. Okay. Like human brain wants to identify patterns everywhere, but anyway. Okay, let's let's go ahead with this.
Yeah.
So what happens because of this phenomena of envy or comparisonitis is that just by observing others, especially the cheaters who don't deserve and have obtained,
Hmm.
okay, or people who deserve much less but have obtained much more,
Yeah.
when the human brain in the in the peripheral vicinity, in the,
Hmm.
you can say, space time vicinity, in the information vicinity, knows about people who actually deserve much less but have obtained much more because of essentially luck and cheating and something like that, basically.
Right.
Okay, so people
Right.
who receive hereditary money, is they are just lucky, right? Nothing else.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So what happens is, where the first model kind of fails, when
Hmm.
we move past when we move past only resources, and when we talk about the overall well-being slash overall eudaimonia or overall mental state of a human being basically. Okay,
Right.
it
Right.
doesn't exactly fail, but some inadequacies are highlighted basically. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so what happens is, let's assume that a person is silently going along the HDHO graph. Okay,
Hmm.
so HD or deservance, HO or obtainance. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
so the person is silently going along this line, the way in
Hmm.
which they are supposed to go. Sometimes they are above, sometimes they are below. Yeah,
Correct.
like for example, in that case wherein which I had to stop lending my books out, otherwise I risk lot not performing well in the exam, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that particular case, basically, I was above the line basically, and then I had to go below the line and then do other kinds of good work and things like that. Research and
Right.
knowledge documentation is also one form of good work basically for humanity.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And this is also related to what are the goals of humanity, and this is also related to what should be the goals of humanity.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we will talk about, like, whenever we talk about should be, then we have to wait, like, because that explanation is coming basically, how to
Right.
derive values from facts basically.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So while we are talking about comparisonitis,
Hmm.
let's say a person is just going ahead. Yeah, a person is just going ahead with their life,
Hmm.
and they are trying to be on the HDHO trajectory.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, what's happening is they see others around them. Let's say even millionaires might see billionaires around them, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And $1 billion is 1,000 times more than $1 million, basically.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So billionaires are still 1,000x richer than millionaires,
Different.
for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
And millionaires are 1,000x richer than normal folks, basically, who are living paycheck to paycheck, let's say, for
Correct.
instance.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So when basically millionaires see billionaires, then they actually become sad. They forget how much gratitude they should have for whatever they obtained in life. And
Correct.
this is, by the way, normal human condition. Okay. This
Hmm.
misery that is created because of envy,
Hmm.
unless you develop a lot of stoicism and a lot of maturity and compassion and things like that, basically,
Right.
this
Right.
is absolutely normal human condition. Envy does naturally tend to develop biologically inside the human heart, and by heart I mean
Okay.
neurons, right?
Okay. Correct.
It's because we, our species, has been an in-group out-group species. So we love our in-group and we hate
Hmm.
our out-group basically.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
unlike some other species, humanity doesn't cooperate on large scales, or at least
Okay.
during the evolution process, the biological
Right.
evolution process,
Right. Right.
humanity has not cooperated on large scales. So there are
Right.
in groups and out groups and wars and things like that basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So all the time humanity is always suffering because of
Right.
wars and because of fighting amongst each other, we can say.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So let us say a person is trying to go ahead along this trajectory of HDHO, right?
Right. Right.
A person is trying to increase their uh, obtainance by increasing their deservance, and a person is trying to go ahead on this trajectory.
Hmm.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
But what ends up happening is that just because they observe that there are some people around them who have obtained much, 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 much more than they actually deserve,
Hmm.
there is what we can call, according to the ET graph, as a state crash, basically.
Okay.
Their state
Right.
crashes or their emotional state crashes. They are now in turmoil, basically, right?
Hmm.
So what happens? The person wanted to go like this, but despite of having millions of dollars, now his happiness obtained is less.
Hmm.
His happiness obtained goes down. His or her
Correct.
happiness obtained goes down. It sinks basically.
Correct.
And so they are now in misery because the
Right.
y-axis is kind of correlated also with the emotions, right? So you can even
Hmm.
have this particular emotional scale. Let's say, for example, this emotional scale that we have over here, this one,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? We can potentially have this emotional scale there also, basically, on the y-axis here.
Yes.
here on the y-axis, we can
Yeah.
potentially have this emotional scale, right? Think.
Yeah. And if we were logical beings, it would have been also. But yeah, I think that's what you mentioned earlier also, right? That there's not a good connect between the ET graph and that's what we're going to, no?
Yeah. So I'll continue. Like I'll not put it over here as of now. I'll just place it somewhere else. But I'm just saying that HO also kind of correlates with the ET graph
ET
basically, or
graph.
the
Huh.
y-axis of the ET graph. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens just because of the phenomena of envy, the
Right.
state crashes.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And this does happen on a mass scale in humanity. The
Hmm.
entire depression cycle because of social media and
Hmm.
the bad feelings that people get because of being on social media are exactly because of this only, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
Because they feel bad as
Hmm.
as they are not able to live the lifestyle that they see other people apparently living on social media, without
Right.
knowing that maybe 95% plus of them are on credit cards and borrowed funds and just
Yes.
trying to portray that lifestyle rather than actually have that lifestyle basically.
Right. Right.
It's like that, correct? So there is going to be what we can call as a state crash. So
Yeah.
now this graph completely shifts, right? This graph completely shifts. The person was going trying to go along the HDHO trajectory. Now the person is now here, like
Hmm.
forced to be a saint basically. Now, in order
Hmm.
to compensate this effect, they may end up going towards hedonism basically, and they may think
Right.
that okay, this vector, the hedonistic vector, and
Hmm.
the forceful state crash vector may combine to form this particular trajectory basically.
Hmm.
They may think like that.
Interesting. Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Mathematically, I also thought about it mathematically. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
let's assume that the richest, wealthiest, and luckiest person in the world basically, okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
is at this HO level. This is the HO level, okay. And let us say somebody else is at this HO level, okay.
Yeah.
So let's assume that the person was lucky and they did not, the richest and the wealthiest person was lucky, and let's assume all these attributes are there with only one person, just for the hypothetical example.
Okay.
Then the
Okay.
difference, whatever is the difference between the obtainance levels basically, okay,
Right.
then we can say that this guy wants to go to half of that level basically.
Hmm.
First, in order to reduce the you can say that okay, this guy, the little guy, was supposed to be at a certain level of obtainance. Let's say the little guy was supposed to be at this level of obtainance, and because of the rich guy's extra obtainance, right?
So, Zenith, can
Because,
you repeat last two sentences? That
yeah,
connection.
yeah, I will repeat.
Yeah.
Let us say the normal guy was supposed to be at this level of obtainance, let's say 100, let's say,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Matlab his deservance was 100 and he was supposed to be at 100 obtainance level basically, okay.
Right. Right.
So let's say he sees somebody who is at, let's say, 10 raised to 9 obtainance level basically. Like let's say
Hmm.
they have a lot of money and they are at like $1 billion, something like that,
Correct.
and they are at 10 raised to 9 obtainance level, okay, and they have not deserved it basically,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's assume means they also have deserved 100 only. They also are a normal individual, because one of my thesis is that all the humans are normal only, like nobody is so great basically
Yes.
compared to anybody else basically.
Yes.
And this is like a correct thesis only, like the role of luck and randomness is much more in our life than we like care to acknowledge, okay.
Right. Right. Huh.
And there is a book, by the way, I think it's called Against Empathy, something like that basically.
Acha. Okay.
And another book is there, The Myth of Meritocracy basically.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Fooled by Randomness is like a very good
Correct.
book.
Yes.
So
Right.
these three books kind of illustrate this particular phenomena. All right.
Acha.
So
Right.
here 10 raised to 9 is what was the obtainance of, let's say, certain person
Hmm.
B, okay, who
Hmm.
happens to be a billionaire, and A, let us say A, his obtainance is at 100. Okay. Now
Right.
let's assume that like whatever is the difference, because of this difference 10 raised to 9 minus 10 raised to 9 minus 100, the psyche of A got sunk basically, right?
Yes.
So mathematically, let's assume that it got sunk by the difference. So 10 raised to 9 minus 10 basically. Okay. Now, in
Right.
order to cover this up, basically, he needs to cover up half first. In if you logically think about it,
Right.
let's say if he thinks like this, that if even if I had half $1 billion basically, then
Hmm.
then maybe I will be happy basically, because then why exactly $500 million? Let's understand that also carefully, okay?
Okay.
Because let us say if he has half of it basically, okay, half of the difference if he has, then he can say that okay, I deserved this much only, but I got this much extra. I deserved only 100, but I got, let's say, $500 million basically,
Okay.
okay,
Right. Right.
half of 10 raised to 9 I got basically. Then my happiness is that much extra, right? $500 million extra, right? So
Correct.
now my extra happiness, because I have $500 million extra approximately compared to what I deserve, but another person has $1 billion extra. So this much
Right.
my happiness is sinking basically because of his extra
Right.
amount of wealth, and that much is kind of getting compensated by my $500 million which I have but don't deserve basically.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay.
So basically, like I'm trying to establish why we are going to half first, basically. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So the initial first order thinking will be I am getting sunk, or my emotional state is getting sunk and remaining sunk because somebody else who doesn't deserve has obtained more.
Right.
By how much has he obtained more? He has obtained more by approximately $1
Okay.
billion. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now my state is in negative $1 billion, right?
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
My state is now proportional to negative $1 billion. In order to bring my state back up to zero, or in this case the level 100,
Right.
in order to bring it to normalcy levels basically, I
Right.
need to have something, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so one solution is that I need to have $1 billion. Okay, then it will come back to the zero level, correct?
Right. Right.
But then I don't want $1 billion because I don't deserve $1 billion. So if I had $500 million basically, okay, then that $500 million will be something extra that I have on top of what I deserve, correct?
Correct. Correct. So that's why it gets counted twice. That's what you mean,
Yeah.
right?
So basically, I'll get $500 million, and now once I get $500 million, now the difference between me and him will be only $500 million, right?
Right. Right. Correct.
So I am getting $500 million. I am getting $500 million. Okay,
Hmm.
I am getting $500 million, and then my state is again sinking, but it is sinking by half a billion dollars
Only
only.
by $500 million. Correct.
So
Correct.
now I am psychologically, I'm supposed to be at my original level where I am
Original.
supposed to be at, basically.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Got it. Got it. Got it. I'll
That's
just
the only
rephrase
logic
that
of
just
half a
to
billion dollars.
huh,
Yeah.
just to kind of
Yeah.
confirm. It won't be $1 billion that I need because me and that guy is $500 million. So it sinks also by like it
Correct.
sinks
Correct.
also by only $500 million. So both counteract each other and at the end
Correct.
come back to the neutral state. That's the minimum we're looking
Exactly.
at
Minimum half a
half
billion
a billion
dollars,
dollars.
basically. Like,
Correct.
because we are also trying to minimize free wealth distribution, na, basically, in this
Huh.
model.
Correct.
Like, we
Correct.
are
Correct.
assuming that the little guy is also little ethical, also, like, basically.
Right. Right. Right.
He's trying to be ethical and still counteract the
Hmm.
negativity of his comparisonitis bias, basically, right?
Yes. 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 Yeah.
By trying his best to be ethical, basically. Okay.
Right. Correct.
So if he is going to pray, I want to win a lottery, how much amount it should be, then he will say firstly that it should be $500 million. So, like that.
Correct.
But
Correct.
what happens is, because of the hedonic set point, once he has that $500 million, and still if he goes along the comparisonitis line, basically, okay, or line of thinking, then he
Hmm.
now says that okay, I have $500 million, but that guy has $500 million more than me.
Right.
Now again, this same logic, because now he doesn't compare with like he had zero, he should be thankful that he
Hmm.
has $500 million. That
Correct.
is that line of thinking doesn't come naturally to the human being.
Hmm.
The line of thinking that comes naturally is okay, I have $500 million, now I have it, so what? Like, taking things for
Right.
granted is what comes naturally to the human being, basically.
Yes. Yes.
The human
Hmm.
psyche settles into the new mode, or the human neurology settles into the new mode of existence,
Right.
the new quantum mechanical state of the brain, so as to say, basically,
Acha.
like
Okay.
the
Okay.
personal psychological state. They settle into it, so that is called as the hedonic set point, right? Basically,
Right. Right.
so
Okay.
they settle into it, and now they look at that guy and say that, oh, I deserved only 100, but I did get $500 million. Yes. And because of the earlier logic, I should have gotten $500 million only. But look at this guy, he deserved 100, but he got $1 billion. So he still got approximately half a billion more than me only, na?
Hmm.
So because of that, now I should again reach a half of that. Like I should
After
get
that,
$250 million basically. Like
right,
the
right.
after a while, after some time, when neurology comes over here in this position, then again the little guy will feel, the little guy who has now half $1 billion in this hypothetical example will
Yeah,
feel that he deserves $250 million more because of the
correct,
same logic. So on one
correct.
side, he's trying to be ethical also. That's why he's not saying that I deserve complete $1 billion. On
Yeah.
the other side, he's trying to also mitigate the comparationist bias that he is facing basically.
Hmm.
So again, $250 million he wants to add, and okay, let's say that also happens. Basically, let's assume that also happens. He ends up adding $250 million to his net worth just because of magic, basically, like just like that.
Right,
Then
right,
okay, now he is at 750, and the other guy is at 1 billion, basically, right?
right.
But then again, after some time, this thing will again happen, basically. So he will get go through this infinite sequence, right? Wherein
Yes,
he will keep adding half plus one fourth plus
yeah.
one eighth plus dot 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 dot, dot, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
So this
yes.
is a geometric progression basically.
Correct,
So
correct. Yeah.
the sum of infinite terms is actually a upon 1 minus r basically. So a is the first term, half upon common ratio is half, so 1 minus
Half,
half. So the
half.
sum actually comes out to be 1. So
Hmm.
comparison at its bias mathematically also implies that unless
Hmm.
you have scaled the entire distance basically, or you have all of what extra that particular person has compared to what they deserve, unless you have scaled the entire mountain, unless you have reached that level, your comparison at its bias is never going to get resolved basically. Got it, no?
True, true. Correct.
So because of that, when we go so deep, then the HDHO model, which is actually a very fundamentally sound and very good model basically for ethics, that
Hmm.
kind of quivers and shakes basically because of the comparison
Right,
at bias. Because humans
right,
are complex, right? Basically, like
right.
their happiness does not directly correlate with their material wealth, basically.
Yes, yes, yes.
So if their happiness was exactly correlated with their material wealth, then this model is it, and it's like a really nice model, and we could stop here, basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. But because that isn't the case, we have to move to other models, basically. Right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next model that we have is the maximally moral lane model. The maximally moral lane. What
Right.
is the maximally moral lane model? Maximally moral lane. Okay. What is it, and like how does it correlate? Okay.
Hmm.
So in the HD equal to HO model, the deservance obtainance graph model, what was the problem? The problem was that because of comparisonitis bias, the human being was suffering, and because of that, his conclusion was that I am eternally in a state of kind of negative $1 billion on the HO graph on the
Correct.
y-axis, and that's
Right.
why I just need to obtain, and that will lead to the fallacy of hedonism. Basically, that is how people will
Hmm.
become cheaters, basically, and they do
Hmm.
also.
Hmm.
Envy is one very important reason why people are cheaters, so as to say.
Hmm.
So herein it is that the humanity within us should stop us from becoming cheaters, and also recognize that there are things more important. There are things more important than just obtaining, even though other people have obtained, maybe unfairly. Maybe the other people have obtained unfairly. But despite the other people having obtained unfairly, still, in that case also, we should just sacrifice for the sake of humanity. And by making this sacrifice, we are going to gain something better in return, basically. So now we are going to talk
Hmm.
about that.
Okay.
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 Yeah. So out of 100% effort, okay, so I call this like 100 PW basically, or let's say 100 points of effort. 100 points of effort are there, let us say. So how many points of effort out of 100 points of effort
Hmm.
over the period of a lifetime should be given or should be transferred towards the world, or towards doing good for the world with pure heart and pure intentions, and
Okay.
how many should be transferred towards obtenance and living our own life, so as to say, basically. So how many should be transferred towards deservance, and how many should be transferred towards obtainance basically. So
Hmm.
I will tell you the answer first. I will start from the answer.
Okay.
The answer is 95% should be for you as a person, but at least 5% should be for the world.
Okay.
Okay. So no, like these are sociological theories basically. So we cannot have mathematical proofs, but this seems to be good and good enough. So if you can make this 10%,
Hmm.
if you can make this 10%, then good. If you
Hmm.
can make this even more, then even better, basically.
Okay. Okay.
I would say
So this is,
I am a
are
yeah,
you
I
saying
would
there's a
say
threshold, or, Raja?
yeah, yeah, continue, continue.
No, are you saying there's a threshold 95.5, or are you saying that's the optimal number?
Uh, Okay, I am saying that we human beings without a choice are born on planet Earth. Like it's going to be
Okay.
long-winded answer. Just
Okay.
bear with it, okay?
Ah,
So we are just, born basically. So we are just thrusted on this earth basically.
right.
And life mostly equals suffering because, like we have earlier discussed, the things that can go wrong can potentially go drastically wrong basically compared to the things that can go right.
Correct.
And the things that have gone right for most people are mainly because of luck rather than anything else basically.
Hmm. Correct.
Like the fact that they are born when the carbon pulse is existing, the fact
Yes.
that they are born in developing or developed nations, the fact that they are born with the internet, with air
Right.
condition, with good surroundings like sanitation, etc., healthcare, etc., etc., etc. Right? So we are just thrust onto the earth and made to suffer. Currently, less people might be suffering compared to in earlier times.
Hmm.
Earlier life was very like tumultuous and tedious and very hectic, right? Basically life
Yeah.
was very difficult for like farmers, and like even 500 years ago life was very difficult basically.
Hmm.
There were wars and famines and natural calamities and like kingdoms and like no equality or democracy or things like that, right?
Hmm. 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 Correct.
So one part of the human psyche always had to live in suppression and slavery, because in a kingly state there is slavery, right? That doesn't mean I am advocating democracy. We will talk about governance principles later basically.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
but definitely kingly states and feudalism is not the answer basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And people have this quote that democracy is the worst form of government apart from any other form of government we have envisioned and implemented. But we can say, at least theoretically, what is the best that we can do? Is it something better than the democracy that exists right now, for example?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what I am saying is we are thrusted on this earth and made to suffer.
Hmm.
Okay. So, what is our responsibility towards the world? What should we take as our responsibility towards the world? And what should we take as like amount of effort that we can spend on ourselves or our loved ones, or you can say so called selfish desires, basically.
Okay.
So, I am saying minimum 5% we should keep of
Hmm.
our like total energy, time, money, heart, willpower, etc.
Right. Right.
over the course of a lifetime, that we will kind of donate to the world or do for good for the world without expecting anything back in return basically.
Hmm.
I am saying that we should donate kind of a thing basically
Right.
in order
Right.
to be on the maximally moral lane. That's what I'm saying here
Right.
basically.
Right.
Because if you are not doing that, then you are purely selfish basically.
Right. Correct.
And if this 5% goes to 10% basically, it's better.
Okay.
I consider currently myself, and every individual has to answer this for themselves basically. And like you cannot fool yourself basically, even though you
Hmm.
can try, but you cannot really fool yourself.
Right.
I consider myself to be at 12% because of the immense amount of sacrifices that I have made. Like I could have been at a much higher state in life right now, basically, stage in life in general, in the sociology of life. But I made a lot of sacrifices to come up with all these mental models and theories. And what happens is only these mental models need to be come up with only once, right? Once
Right.
we have once we have E is equal to MC square, for example, now the entire world can use it basically.
Right. Right.
It's like that. So I
Hmm.
consider myself to be at 12% with whatever amount of effort, etc., that I have sacrificed. And once I document all these things, I'll be at 17%. Now to go beyond 17% is like quite difficult, basically. But
Hmm.
I'll keep trying, basically. Like I have the lifetime ahead of me to try, basically.
Oh,
Okay.
oh.
And in this 95% also, just as a sake of optimization, I'm going to say that 5% should be your dopa activities, and 90% should be your effort taking activities, basically.
Right. Right.
So this seems to be like a good distribution, basically.
Hmm.
This seems to be like a good distribution.
Right.
Got it, no?
Right.
Yeah. We will try to justify this later, okay? But I'm just putting it out there right now, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can say this can be called as PP, like points for pleasure, 5% points for pleasure. Now I'm not using the word happiness. I'm using the
Hmm.
word pleasure. This can
Yes.
be PE, basically points for effort. Okay.
Effort.
Yeah, proportional points for effort, basically. And
Hmm.
this will be PW, points for the world, basically.
The word.
So,
Right.
okay. World or humanity or progeny, etc. Whatever we can call, like
Right.
bloodline or whatever, like the future of humanity, so as to say. Okay. So this 5, 90, and 5 is like a good because if you see, this 90 is kind of going towards work, right? It's not even enjoyment, right? It's
Correct.
kind of going towards work.
Yeah.
So if you really think about it, it's like this is like 5% that's going towards HD, and
Huh.
then 5% that is going towards HO, basically, right?
Yes.
If you
Right.
kind of
Correct.
correlate it back, and this is just to stabilize the things and things like that. Okay. Now,
Right.
there are a few caveats over here, basically,
Hmm.
or few salient features. Now, let's say if a person donates their time earlier in life rather than later in life, then it amounts to slightly more, basically, because donating, let's say, 10
Hmm.
hours when we are 90 years old is not as harmful as donating 10 hours when we are 20 years old, basically. Or
Hmm. Right.
like the donation of 10 hours when we are 20 years old is more significant because those 10 hours could have been compounded, right? We live in an era of
Yeah.
leverage, basically. Like,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
so 10 hours when we are 90 years old is not the same as 10 hours when we are 20 years old.
Right.
This is easy to understand when I express it in terms of money. Like, let's say
Hmm.
$10,000 when we are 20 years old is much more than $10,000 when we are 90 years old, basically.
Correct. Correct.
Like,
Correct.
so it's like that, basically.
Hmm.
So if you are giving time early, and which I did end up giving time early, that's why I shot to 12, basically, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so that means I am paying with the graph. Now, what is the meaning of paying with the graph? Let's understand that. So if I am paying $10,000 at time X, the value of $10,000 is $10,000. But if I am in a compounding upward trajectory, the value of $10,000 is going to be like this, na, for me.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can see,
Hmm.
right? So $10,000 at age 60 of or age 70 would be more like, let's say, $1 million.
Correct.
So when I paid $10,000 today, I actually paid $1 million when I was at age 60. So this is the
Yeah.
meaning of paying with the graph. I am paying with the graph here, basically,
Okay. Okay.
right? So I'm not just paying the $10,000. I am paying with the opportunity cost of what was there in the future, basically. Got it,
Correct.
no? So this is
Correct.
the
Yeah.
meaning of paying with the graph. The like
Okay.
this is a part of the net worth versus time graph, you can say.
Yes. Yes.
Net worth versus time graph. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So again, like this illustrates the paying with the graph phenomena also. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, remember that life is not about increasing net worth only.
Hmm.
Like the
Hmm.
original thesis was we want to eh, maximize utility.
Hmm.
So we want to maximize the area under the curve, basically, so as to say,
Correct. Correct.
right? Area under the curve of what? Of the emotions time
ET.
graph,
ET. Huh. Yeah.
of the ET graph, yeah?
Correct.
Emotions time graph.
Yeah.
We can call it as emoti because ET can be also energy time, right? So just to avoid confusion,
Acha.
so
Okay. Huh.
we'll call it
Emote.
as emo
Emotigraph.
versus time graph, yeah?
Hmm.
Emoti graph, yeah. So this is the thesis of the maxillary moral lane, basically. Okay.
Hmm.
So this is valid only if you are in normal professions that don't harm humanity. Like for
Hmm.
example, if you are in the porn industry or the tobacco industry or the alcohol industry, or let's say voluntary prostitution, or let's say voluntary OnlyFans industry, which is like another prostitution slash porn industry. Let's say
Correct.
voluntary military industrial complex or something like that. Then
Hmm.
your H then now we go back to the earlier model of ethics. Then your HD is already very low, basically. Okay. Now
Hmm.
you are like a criminal, basically. So your HO should also be very low, basically. Right.
Right. Right.
So these are for all normal professions, basically, that
Right.
don't particularly cause extreme amount of harm to humanity.
Hmm.
Like a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or like a shopkeeper or
Right.
like a professor, obviously there will be slight deltas here and there basically. Like for
Right.
example, you can argue that okay, the job of an educator is maybe having slightly more amount of HD compared to the job of a lawyer, basically something like that,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
the job of a like construction engineer who is just like using their skill set to construct buildings and things like that. So
Right.
some slight variation can be there basically,
Hmm.
but more or less for all nominal and normal professions basically, this is the scenario, and this is what
Correct.
I am recommending according to the maximally moral lane. So what is the maximally moral lane? Giving minimum 5% of lifetime effort, as 5% of what, as far as the total area of the graph is concerned basically.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, giving minimum 5% of the total lifetime effort is your fundamental obligation towards the world, because
Hmm.
there has to be some fundamental obligation towards the world, right? Otherwise
Hmm.
everybody will be hedonist and the earth will crash or humanity will crash very fast basically.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there has to be some sense of responsibility towards the world, right?
Hmm.
Why? Because you have been given a right to life, right?
Hmm.
You have been given this gift of life.
Right.
So with each right slash gift comes some amount of responsibility,
Responsibility. Hmm.
right? So our genetic memory or our neurological memory, basically, the memory that says, or the part of neurology that says that life should be preserved because it is worthwhile preserving human and other life forms on the planet,
Right.
also imply that you need to act in such a manner that you actually increase the longevity of life, and at least 5% of your net effort over the course of a lifetime should be in this direction. Most people, because of the comparisonitis bias that almost all humans suffer from, their
Hmm.
contribution towards the longevity of humanity are negative. That's why humanity is going in going in shambles right now, and like going to shit basically, you can say.
Right.
So
Hmm.
girls compare with other girls and say that okay, this girl is like getting so many likes on Instagram, so I will also expose like my body on Instagram, and then that is a slippery slope, and after some time from Instagram they go into OnlyFans basically.
Hmm.
Then they can go into other fields like the porn industry, which is prostitution on camera and prostitution
Right.
off camera basically, for example.
Right. Right.
And now this leads to more comparisonitis bias because other girls will observe this
Hmm. Correct.
and follow along the same trajectory.
Yeah.
Similarly, let's say cheaters and crooks, basically, let's say, okay, somebody is like is committing a fraud in the financial industry. Somebody else who is close to them observes that okay, this person has committed this particular financial fraud, and then because of comparisonitis bias, they think that oh, I should also commit that fraud,
Hmm.
otherwise I'll stay behind, basically.
Right.
Same thing happens in politics also. This politician is polarizing and is using, let's say, religion and people's fundamental beliefs and sentiments in order to gain power. So let's
Hmm.
say I'll also do the same thing and I'll also gain power.
Hmm.
So you can see that everywhere the path that leads us to the so-called proverbial hell. I'm not religious, so I don't
Right.
want to use religious terminology, but the
Right.
so-called proverbial hell is because of the comparisonitis bias, basically.
Right.
So comparisonitis and envy, comparisonitis essentially means feeling bad because of us comparing socially or socio-economically with somebody else, basically,
Yeah.
or status-wise. So
Hmm.
comparisonitis bias happens to be the reason because of which the world is going to hell.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this model of ethics, the maximally moral lane model.
Right.
So again, why are we saying that this is the maximally moral lane and not the perfectly moral lane? Why is this not called as the perfectly moral lane model? Because even if you have to do something basic also, then you have to use some resources. Like for example, I needed to purchase the books that I studied from, right?
Hmm.
So when I am purchasing those books, then I am potentially depriving economic opportunity from somebody else, because I could have purchased the books and donated them, right? I did not do that. I could have
Right.
donated enough copies basically. So even if I am living my normal life also, I am taking something from somebody else. And I know that there will be so many people who will criticize and there will be voices against this particular statement of mine. But listen, like, the energy flux is finite, so the
Hmm.
energy density is also finite basically, right?
Hmm.
And hence the resources situation on earth is finite.
Correct.
So when we are taking a part of the pie, it is true that it is now kept from somebody else who cannot now access it.
Hmm.
So when we are taking and consuming some part of the energy flux or the resources spectrum, we are keeping it from somebody else basically. So this statement is true. Whatever I am saying is true. Even though it may not be convenient, but it is true. And we are here going to talk about what is true and not just what feels good.
Right. Correct.
So it is true that billionaires are actually taking from the world disproportionately more.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's why Warren Buffett is a typical example, but peculiar example, where in which he donated 99% plus of his wealth basically.
Okay. Right.
So he also did some activities, maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly, maybe because of something called as MRP that we are going to see later basically. So he invested in the Coca-Cola company, and the Coca-Cola company is really bad for humanity actually.
Right. Huh.
Like it's equivalent to the tobacco company or the porn industry
Right.
because it basically spreads hypernormal stimuli. It's like Facebook basically that
Right.
spreads social media addiction basically, something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can argue that if Coca-Cola did not exist, some other cold drink company would exist basically. Okay,
Okay.
you
Right.
can, and they exist also. So you can argue that way. You can argue like that basically. So Warren Buffett, even if he did invest in Coca-Cola, that decreased his HD points basically. If you see,
Hmm. Correct.
but maybe it was a part of the bigger strategy. Maybe see, maybe he did not think
Hmm.
about this consciously. It decreased his HD points. That
Hmm.
means it made him less deserving. But then by donating 99% of his huge wealth, it increased his HD points also by
Correct.
leaps and bounds and even higher proportions, right?
Right. So locally he reduces HD
Correct.
points, but
And that's why his happiness. That's why we cannot really travel along this straight line.
hmm. Right.
Yeah, because sometimes you need to accomplish something, and in order to accomplish something, you cannot think about what second and third order consequences this will have. So he wanted to accomplish higher rate of returns on his portfolio.
Correct.
So he cannot think of second, third order effects because if he thinks about that, then his primary aim will not be accomplished basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I am myself observant that I have wasted so much amount of time in thinking
Hmm.
about nth order consequences. And no matter how potent the human brain is, the nature of reality is probabilistic, and you cannot predictively say what the nth order consequences would be. You can only probabilistically say basically.
Right.
So you cannot really evaluate an action by
Huh.
trying to think about nth order consequences. And this is how even my brain
Huh.
has wasted a lot of time basically. But then
Okay.
these mental models came out of it, so now we
Okay.
can say
Yeah.
that it has invested a lot of time basically.
Right. Right.
But some amount of it was wasteful also, purely wasteful as well basically. So
Right.
I am bashing my like psychological intellect against a dead end basically for a long time. This also happened for a long time basically.
Right. Right.
And I have some regret also that I should have realized this mental model earlier than later basically.
Okay.
But then if you are traveling a road not taken, then you are quite lonely basically. It's like that. So,
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
so you do the best you can do at that point in time and move ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what we are talking about is
Hmm.
sometimes you need to behave in such a manner so as to achieve a MRP on a process. Now, what is MRP? I'll explain in short.
Okay.
MRP I call as minimum requisite power. Okay, I'll explain it
Achha.
over here because this is again a concept that will repeat in our discussions. It is
Okay.
extremely important. Minimum requisite power. Okay.
Hmm.
So what is the meaning of minimum requisite power? So I'll correlate this with what is called as activation energy in chemistry. So in chemistry, if you have the like energy time graph basically for a chemical reaction, okay. So
Right.
firstly, we need to give some higher amount of energy. Let's say here the reactants are at a lower amount of energy, and let's
Right.
say here products are going to be formed. Now, in order for reactants to go to products, products may have a net higher amount of energy or lower than the reactants, but there is this energy barrier that needs to be overcome. Okay,
Okay.
so this is the barrier that needs to be overcome in order to change any sociological state basically.
Okay. Okay.
So in order to
Right.
put any human or a group of humans from one state to another state, this energy barrier needs to be overcome, and then there
Okay.
is a stable equilibria type of a situation basically, wherein which
Right.
confirmation bias takes in, and then group identity and herd mentality takes in. Because of that, the sociological state kind of remains in the new form basically. So, for example,
Hmm.
in India, the laws of reservation were supposed to be only for 50 years or so, right? Or even
Correct.
lesser. But
Correct.
now they are still continuing because it takes a higher amount of energy to for making India get out of that particular sociological state wherein which the laws of
Hmm.
reservation will persist,
Right.
or like laws of reservations will stop persisting rather.
Ah, right.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
So, for example, let's say a man is wooing a woman and he wants her to be his girlfriend slash wife in the future.
Hmm.
So he is kind of putting in energy to shift her psychosociological state.
Correct.
Her
Correct.
like he wants to switch the psychosociological state of her, of him, and their combined families and friend circle, their in group, so as to say,
Right.
such that he will in the future become his wife.
Right.
In the recent future, his girlfriend, and in the
Ah,
far away future, his wife, basically. Something
correct.
like that, basically.
Correct.
Yeah. So he is putting in some energy.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Now, if that energy is not efficient, smart, and it does not overcome the minimum requisite power criteria, then he can try as much as he wants to, but he will not be able to accomplish that thing. So,
Yeah.
minimum requisite power means what is the minimum amount of power that you need,
Hmm.
okay, in order to accomplish something.
Yeah.
Another example here I can give you is like the escape velocity from the surface of Earth.
Oh yeah.
So
Correct.
you can try to throw stones etc. They will not go beyond a certain height. They will just come back basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So unless you have that escape velocity,
Yeah.
unless you have that like 11.2 kilometers per
Hmm.
second, that kind of speed, unless
Right.
they achieve that escape velocity from the surface of Earth, you are not going to be able to throw them into outer space basically.
Yeah.
So, just like in physics, social and chemistry activation energy, like we
Hmm.
said, saw just now, in
Hmm.
sociology also, everything has something called as MRP basically,
Right.
minimum requisite power
Recommend.
basically,
Yeah.
right? So, that much minimum amount of effort is needed for a startup to succeed, for a student to score very well in the entrance exam, okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
for us to be able to throw a stone out into outer space basically, for
Correct.
example.
Yeah.
So, no matter how long you try for,
Hmm.
unless MRP is going to be reached, you are not going to succeed in that endeavor.
Correct.
You can keep trying for long time. Like you can take a needle and try to dig a tunnel with the needle, basically. You can keep trying like for a long time, but it's
Right.
not going to be effective. And hence,
Right.
since human life is finite, it is kind of wasteful, basically.
Hmm.
You can take a needle and try to cut a tree. You will be doing it for a long time, maybe
Right.
decades or even centuries also. Still, the
Right.
tree may not, be cut.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
unless you have the right tool and the minimum requisite power, you cannot
Yeah.
accomplish things, so as to say, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a very interesting startup dilemma also. If a startup fails, did they fail because the idea was wrong, or did they fail because they
Hmm.
lack minimum requisite power?
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
that like in business discussions, this will come up again
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
But again, here what was important was to document the concept of minimum requisite power.
Right. Correct.
So what happens is most of us are in a situation. See, if if the following statement, if the following thesis is correct, which says that humanity has made life very convenient, then why is it that most of us are having to work so very hard?
Hmm.
It's because humanity has made life very convenient, and hence humanity has also made in group fights very convenient. Please understand.
Okay. Okay.
Because the structure of humanity is not such that everybody is collaborating with each other.
Hmm.
The structure of humanity should be such that everybody is collaborating with each other. It should be,
Right.
but it is not.
Hmm.
So countries are competing with each other. Inside a country, states are competing for resources. Inside states, like politicians are competing, families are
Right.
competing, industries are competing with each other. Social
Right.
media is competing with everybody for the sake of attention.
Right. Yeah.
They are backed up by huge amounts of dollars and the dopaminergic behavior to which human beings are very addicted very easily.
Right.
So it's like to derive a physics analogy over here.
Hmm.
Let's say inside a magnetic substance, let's say this is a magnetic substance, okay, there are magnetic dipoles that are randomly oriented in all possible directions basically,
Correct.
okay. The magnetic dipoles are randomly oriented, that is the default nature of humanity, let's understand that.
Okay.
So they are not cooperating, humans are not
Hmm.
cooperating.
Okay.
Let us let us say it's a paramagnetic substance. Okay.
Hmm.
Let us say it's a paramagnetic substance. Then in
Okay.
the presence of an external magnetic field, let's say if we apply external magnetic field like this, okay, then all the dipoles are going to now align in the same direction, like
Right.
so,
Right.
till the time the magnetic field exists. Now, if this happens, let's say there is an alien invasion threat or some comet is going to strike Earth or something like that, then
Hmm.
everybody will try to tend to cooperate basically. One
Right.
example is the
Right.
recent COVID crisis basically.
Yes.
Okay. Then,
Right.
as soon as the magnetic field is removed because of chaos, thermodynamics, and entropy that
Hmm.
kicks in, again the state comes back to the original state basically.
Right. Right.
Right? Even if you divide this model in the form of countries basically, then instead of being a paramagnetic substance, then initially humanity can be modeled like a ferromagnetic substance, wherein which there are various different domains basically, and
Acha.
these domains have directional dipoles. So
Okay.
dipoles will
Okay.
be directed in one direction in one domain, basically, you can say.
Acha. Acha.
And in the presence of a magnetic field, all these domains will now point in one same direction, basically.
Hmm.
So if external magnetic field is applied, all the domains will point in same direction. And
Right.
even for a ferromagnetic substance, even after the external magnetic field is removed,
Hmm.
the everything points in the same direction only. For a for a ferromagnetic substance,
Acha.
the dipoles keep pointing, the magnetic dipoles keep pointing in the same direction. But this does not happen with humanity. When the
Okay.
external
Okay.
thread that is uniting humanity is removed,
Hmm.
humanity again starts quarreling amongst each other.
Right. Huh.
A
Correct.
typical example of this in sociology would be the advent of feminism. Feminism has come in because mainly because of the carbon pulse, right?
Right.
Because
Okay. Okay. So
l-
then
because
life
I
got
like
convenient
how
now.
I mentioned in the earlier podcast,
Yeah.
there is no feminism when there is adversity.
Correct. Correct.
Feminism can
Correct.
exist only in prosperity.
Right.
Like you can say the toxic versions of feminism, basically, is
Right.
what I mean over here,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because women now don't need men, basically, right?
Hmm.
So because women don't need men, they have like their own jobs, etc., etc.
Right.
So the respect for men is also at an all-time low, simply
Right.
speaking.
Right.
Like they are compartmentalizing men and using them as they please. They are using the so-called good-looking men just for some kind of pleasure. Like not all women, of course, but in
Hmm.
general, I am saying this is the
Right.
trend to which the world is shifting. This is the
Hmm.
sociological state to which the world is shifting, basically.
Right. Right.
And then other orbiters they are using for day-to-day gains, like for small tasks and things like that. And social
Right.
media they are using for validation.
Right. Yeah.
So they kind of don't need men. So because of that, feminism has upsurged basically. In a state of war or depravity or famine or adversity, there is
Right.
no toxic feminism basically. Then
Right. Correct.
in the like true state of nature, men and women will revert back to their own gender identities and gender roles, so as to say,
Hmm.
natural gender
Yeah.
roles basically,
Right. Yeah.
right? So in humanity, there is a lot of in-group fighting and in-group competition. You would be surprised to know that all of the energy that we are extracting from Mother Earth,
Hmm.
90 plus percent of it is going in group fighting.
Wow. Okay.
So problem solve. This is my guesstimate
Right.
from whatever I see
Right.
basically.
Right. So
So
what all would that?
problem solving and adventing, taking humanity forward basically, advancing humanity is
Right.
less than 10% of it.
Hmm.
90% of it is going in fighting basically, essentially.
So what all comes under this fighting?
Everything like literal wars,
Right.
political wars, economic wars, competition, etc., etc., etc.,
Hmm.
everything.
Correct. 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 Yeah.
So humanity's current sociological state is that 90 plus percent. It could be 95 plus percent also.
Yeah.
But I am just saying I can definitely say that it is with C alpha 99 plus confidence interval proportional to more than 99 plus. I can say that 90 plus amount of energy is effectively getting wasted in fighting amongst each other. Let's understand this.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that is why human life is so difficult because
Hmm.
we cannot cooperate at a large scale basis.
Right. Right.
So the
Hmm.
solution to all global problems is to force humans to cooperate at a large scale basis, basically. Because
Hmm.
humans are like children or even worse than children, basically. They just want to quarrel even if it leads to destruction of both the parties.
Hmm.
That is the
Right.
extent of ubiquitous immaturity that is present inside the human organism, basically. They cannot cooperate on a large scale basis.
Right. Right.
They always want to compete, and hence pseudo competitions like IPL cricket matches, football matches, etc. are glorified
Hmm.
because psychologically fans identify as the in group of that particular team, and when that
Correct.
team wins, it's like biopsychologically or neurologically their state elevates basically
Right.
because
Yeah.
they feel that their in group has won.
Hmm.
So this in group out group dynamics is something that is making life so tough. So when I say 90 to 95% you
Yeah.
give for yourself, it actually means 90 to 95% you give for the struggle that you have to do in this world.
Hmm.
That is forced upon the struggle in the
Okay.
world that is forced upon you. And this 90 to
Yeah.
95% is roughly similar to the competition that human being, the resource competition and otherwise competition, status competition, power competition, etc.
Right.
All kinds of competitions in the world, basically, right?
Right. Right. Okay.
So I will later propose systems wherein which you can see that if we are collaborating and not competing, let's assume that if we are only collaborating and not competing, this
Hmm.
95% of pressure will be eased from everybody on planet Earth, from everybody.
Okay.
That we will like governance structures we will go on to later, maybe 5 pods from now or something like that, basically.
Right. Right.
It's like at a later stage, basically.
Yeah.
So this, why is this necessary? This is necessary because you need to combat the attacks that will inevitably come in your direction, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because see, if you don't do anything, then you are like going backwards in humanity, right?
Yeah.
If you are just a monk and just like ignore everything, then resource wise you are going backwards.
Hmm.
Social status wise, you are kind of losing the opportunity to gain social status. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are kind of going backwards. You are flowing backwards, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this maximally moral lane model says that 90 to 95% efforts, 90 to 95% efforts have to be put just for the sake of maintaining whatever position you are at in life and trying to
Hmm.
ascend it by some amount, basically.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And a 5% minimum should be put towards the ethics of the world
Right.
because that is your responsibility because you got the gift of life. And
Right.
this 5% should be towards what we can call as pleasure, so as to say, because of lack of a better word, I am calling this as pleasure. We can call this even as eudaimonia, but as of now I am calling this as pleasure, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So 5% of the effort can be put towards what we can call as pleasure, so as to maximize the area under the ET graph, if you remember.
Hmm. Correct.
The area under the ET graph needs to be maximized, right?
The
So
emotigraph, huh?
yeah, emotigraph.
Ah,
Yeah, correct.
emotigraph.
Yeah,
Right.
the area under the
Now,
emotigraph, which is kind of the aim of a personal individual human's life, basically.
yes. Yes.
So this gives a good picture from the input, basically. See, HDHO is more like the output, right? We are worrying about what we obtained, basically.
Hmm. Correct.
But here, the more mature model, the maximally moral lane model, okay,
Hmm.
is correlated with the input. So what we are going to do with our effort or time or energy or money, basically.
Hmm.
So 90% of it or 90 to 95% of it will go in professions that we hold.
Correct.
95% of it will go in professions that we hold. 5% for most humans doesn't go but should go towards, minimum 5% should go towards the ethical responsibility that a human being has towards the world
Right.
because of the gift of life and the gift of humanity that they got, the gift of living in higher conscious states.
Right.
And 5% goes towards PP, which is like points towards pleasure slash eudaimonia.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the maximally moral lane model. Okay. Now here a parallel concept is the concept of what I call as from 199
Hmm.
to 99 1. Okay.
Okay.
From 199 to 99 1. So what does
Right.
this mean? I'll write a book about this also, from 199 to 99.1. Just a second. So correlated with this particular model, which is like
Mm.
the maximally moral lane model, is this
Right.
idea of from 199 to 99.1 basically.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So what is the meaning of from 199? So initially in life, for the sake of MRPs and effectiveness, let's talk about the concept of from 199 to 99.1.
Yeah.
So initially in life, because a person has to hit MRPs, basically minimum requisite powers on various different things, basically. Like
Mm.
for
Mm.
example, if I had not prepared for the competitive entrance exam at that point in time when I did, then I wouldn't have been able to be so successful in life.
Correct.
This is an example. So if
Yeah.
I had not hit that MRP, then my life trajectory would have been different, basically,
Mm.
potentially.
Mm.
So this is an example of earlier in life, especially, we need to hit more MRPs, right?
Yeah.
And later in life, let's say at age 100, let's say you have got 100 million dollars saved, basically. But
Mm.
you are already at age 100, so you don't really need 100 million dollars at age 100, right?
Correct.
So you may require only a fraction of that. So
Yeah.
rest of it you can choose to donate.
Yeah.
So that is the meaning of it.
Right.
Initially initially we may be living 99% for ourselves.
Mm.
Initially in life we may be living 99% for ourselves. This is for ourselves, us,
Yes.
and
Yes.
1% for the world.
Yeah.
Okay, but when we die, you know that saying na, that when we are born, basically, like we are crying and others are laughing, and when we die, others should be crying and we should be laughing, basically, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, this is not my saying, like this is a common
Okay.
saying. So
Right.
99% of what we are doing should be for the world, basically,
Right.
and 1% or less for us. Got it now?
Mm. Mm.
So if you think about it, what I am saying or postulating is one way to look at our own ethical obligation with respect to humanity is, at the start, 99% we are doing for ourselves, 99% we are doing for ourselves, and
Yes.
1% for the world. Let's say this is our lane of life, basically, so as to say. Or a better way to draw the lane of life, just a second, I'll do that right now, is to draw it along the HDHO graph, something like this, right?
Okay. Right.
And what we can say is, like, I am now going to map this maximally moral lane philosophy over here. So
Right.
maximally moral lane is, see, 5% is like kind of towards pleasure, 5% towards the world, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and 95% to combat the competitiveness of the world, the in-group fighting, basically.
Mm.
And as ethical, or when I say as ethical, I actually mean as non-ethical, as not non-ethical as possible.
Mm.
So we
Okay.
are avoiding being non-ethical rather
Yes.
than trying to be ethical there,
Got
basically.
it. Got it. Got it.
So this is kind of the lane, basically. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the contribution, the effective net 5% contribution is not so linear, basically. The
Hmm.
effective net 5% contribution, okay, is somewhat like this. Let's
Yeah.
say this is the lane. The effective net 5% contribution is, let's say, less initially and much more later. So let's assume that this is like kept for pleasure, basically. Let the pleasure side lane be on the side, so as to say.
Right. Right.
So let's say the net contribution is, initially we are completely working for ourselves, so no contribution is there, and later, like here we are at 199, so 199, something like that. Like
Right.
we are already removing whatever is the pleasure oriented component. So after forgetting about that, I am talking about,
Acha.
after
Right.
forgetting about this pleasure oriented component,
Right.
whatever time, energy, money, resources are left, basically.
Hmm.
So on that we are 199 at the start,
Okay.
okay, and later at the end of life, whatever is the kind of predicted end or whatever end, later
Right.
at the end, yeah, later at the end of life, then we are going to go like this, basically, like this. So it's going to be 99 1, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So overall it has to contribute to minimum 5%, basically. That's the idea.
Hmm.
And again, I'm talking about Warren Buffett is a very peculiar case study example because he is like this. His life trajectory was
Yeah.
like this, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you will say, Zenith, this seems to be an area that is greater than
Better than
5%, right?
5%. Yeah. Yeah.
No, no, but I told you about paying with the graphs. Na, this is not
Hmm.
such a linear lane, basically.
Yes.
Like
Got it.
this,
Got it. Okay.
this
Yeah.
lane, if you think about it, basically, it's more
Hmm.
like a like this kind of a lane, basically. So
Okay.
it's like
Right. Right.
we are
Ah.
also paying with the graphs, na, basically.
Yes. 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 Correct.
So
Correct.
yeah, in fact, this is a good illustration. I should have drawn it on the next page. Maybe I'll draw it again. So this lane is not that linear, basically. It's something
Hmm.
like this.
Hmm.
And there
Hmm.
is this concept of paying with the graphs also that takes place in this.
Yes. Yes.
Got it, na? So
Yeah.
the HDHO line is more like a band, basically, that we have to operate in.
Correct. Correct.
Sometimes we are towards the pleasure side, sometimes we are towards the completely sacrificially living side for living sacrificially for the planet earth and the future of humanity, and 90% of the times we are at combating like the competitiveness
Hmm.
of the world, basically.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
meaning like working hard to earn money.
Correct.
That
Exactly. Yeah. What? Yeah.
that is what
Regular
it means, basically.
grind.
Yeah, the grind, the hustle, the
Grind.
grind, the
Yeah.
day-to-day hustle and the grind, basically,
Yes.
because of
Yes.
which, despite of being in such abundance, we still have to compete, basically,
Hmm.
so heavily. All
Yes.
right. So now the idea of 199 to 99 1 is kind of clear, basically, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
even if a person goes, I'll just eliminate this particular part. Yeah.
Hmm.
Even if a person goes from 199 to 99 1, all right, it is later in life that he is going to contribute more. But since early contributions amount to more because the earlier you contribute, you are paying with the graph, right?
Correct. Correct. Exactly.
So that means that is kind of balanced out, basically. So
Oh,
as
right. Right. Right.
got it, na? So this
Yeah.
is one philosophy that I want to embed over here right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And then the last important point I want to remark or say about the maximally moral lane is about intentions and intentionality, basically. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So for this, I'm going to draw something here. Okay.
Hmm.
So we human beings, what are we doing? We are consuming resources first.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can say, like, let's say if we did not exist compared to if we existed. So if let us say this is the ecology level.
Okay.
Okay. Ecology or like Earth, etc. Universe, whatever is the level of resources in the universe. So
Right.
firstly, we are consuming resources because for the first many years of their life, human beings are neotenous, right? So
Hmm.
they require a lot of feeding before they become actually productive, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
initially, humans are just consuming resources.
Yeah.
Now, after consuming resources, they are working to combat, you can say, combat competition.
Hmm.
Now, because they consumed resources and combated competition, now they require some hypernormal stimuli. But while consuming hypernormal stimuli, they are damaging themselves as well as the earth.
Hmm. Hmm.
And now to combat this effect, you have to go in PW format, matlab points for the world, basically, or contribute ethically to the world or humanity.
Right.
Okay, later we are going to talk about efficient modes of living. So we will
Right.
see if it is possible to integrate all these phenomena together, basically. So
Acha.
this
Okay.
is like hypernormal stimuli.
Right.
So basically dopaminism, what I generally call as
Correct.
dopaminism.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So consumption of resources, then accumulation of extra resources. Correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is the first kind of cycle you can say.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next cycle is with the accumulated extra resources, enjoying, and
Hmm.
if the human being is ethical, then contributing, basically.
Contributing also. Right.
Right? Sometimes contributing can come first, enjoyment can come later, and so on and so forth, basically.
Hmm. Okay.
So you can see that there is a twist over here, and guess what this line is along which we are moving? It's
So it's
again
to
the HDHO
replace.
line. So it's actually supposed to be like this. So this is actually supposed to be like this. Correct?
Correct. Okay. Right. Huh.
Consuming the ecology basically. So if this is like the x-axis, but then it is kind of flipped basically. I just meant to say that we are twisting and turning around the HDHO line basically.
Yes, yes.
So we are consuming ecology. By consuming ecology, HD is only happening basically. Then we are obtaining,
Ah,
we are we are obtaining. So again, consumption is happening basically because we are obtaining resources. We still haven't given anything back to the earth.
yes, 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 right.
So this is mapped over here, and
Ah,
this is mapped in this side only because consumption side only. So
both
above
over,
part
yes.
of the SDHO line is consumption basically. Now hypernormal stimuli is also consumption only, and then contribution for the world.
Right.
And this is the entropic nature of life, right? You need to consume more in order to contribute less, basically. That is entropy.
Okay, okay.
And that is why one day, if nothing else, then the sun is going to engulf the earth and humanity is going to end, basically.
Right.
That is the real truth.
Correct. Yeah.
With 99 plus percent C alpha, I am talking about this,
Yes, yes.
right? This is how it is. This is what we have to accept. And that is the fate of humanity and the fate of all of us, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Sad, happy, objective. We are trying to be scientists over here, basically.
Correct.
So we are going to see it in a value neutral and emotion neutral manner, basically. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So this is how the twist and turns of this particular human behavior map onto the HDHO line, basically. So
Okay.
all these three factors kind
Hmm.
of relate back to consumption, even though this for a human being is more like effort and productivity.
Hmm.
But this effort is not going towards contributing to the planet. It's going
True.
towards
Yeah.
stabilizing their own lives only.
Yeah.
So ecology is consumed from effort to obtain things, then hypernormal stimuli, and then PW points. PW means some contribution towards the earth.
Yes, world. Yeah.
So basically, contribution towards the earth is coming at a later stage, right? Are you getting it?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why the last salient point is that of intentions, basically. Okay,
Okay. Okay.
intentions. So what if the like I have spent so many countless hours thinking about this thing. Ultimately, I found the correct solution. What I will not say what seems to be the correct solution in order to try to be humble, basically. Matlab, with all due humility, this is the correct solution. Intentions matter because physics, see, everything is upstream in physics, please understand. So,
Correct.
physics is quantum mechanical in nature. So, nature of our reality is quantum mechanical.
Correct.
That means the future is not known, but it is probabilistic.
Correct. Yeah.
So, intentions are affecting that probability basically.
Our intentions affect the probability. Huh? Okay. Huh.
Intentions affect the probability of longevity, sustenance, thriving of humanity basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Correct.
So,
Right.
so this is the maximally moral lane that when you are forced to do or like go ahead with whatever XYZ activities on a day-to-day basis. So when I am forced to not donate my books and study for my exam instead,
Right.
because that is not a long-term solution basically, right?
Hmm.
When
Correct.
I am
Correct.
forced to not donate my books and study for the exam instead,
Right.
what does it mean to say that I am still traveling the maximally moral lane? It means that with
Hmm.
all due intentions in my heart, in the future, I want to do good for humanity. That is
Yes.
what it means, basically.
Yes. Yes. Correct. Correct.
So, this is where intentions matter a lot
Hmm.
because you are not doing everything simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
You are not consuming initial resources simultaneously. You are not putting in effort to combat competitiveness simultaneously because 90% of your net effort in your human lifespan is going to go towards combating competition.
Hmm.
Let's take the example. Let's say Sham is a content creator on the internet. Let's
Right.
assume that there are only 10 other content creators. So
Okay.
Sham will get how much? One tenth of the traffic of the world, roughly, he will get basically.
Yes.
All things
Yes.
considered equal, basically.
Yeah.
Think. Now, today, will Sham get one tenth of the traffic of the world? No.
Hmm.
So, why is this happening? So, early content creators on YouTube really scaled a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because of kind of the first mover type of advantage,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So we'll later look at advantages in business processes and cycles also. But anyway,
Okay.
coming back to the point. So
Hmm.
intentions matter a lot basically. Let's say
Hmm.
a person when they were in their effort phase while combating competitiveness, in that phase of life only, let us say the person died.
Correct. That's what
Then we
when I was
can,
thinking that.
yeah, if let us say the person died, then we cannot say that that person is less ethical or non-ethical because he never had a chance to increase their HD. They never had
Exactly.
a chance to increase their HD, let us say.
Correct.
If they had held intentions true to their heart from the
Hmm.
start,
Hmm.
and in the future, if they had lived
Hmm.
because of the unforeseen, ungodly circumstance, because of whatever made them die, if they had lived instead, then because of those intentions, they would have done good for humanity and increased the probability of longevity of humanity, basically.
Yes. Yes. Correct.
Got it? So, intentions matter while we are traversing along the maximally moral lane, basically.
Hmm.
And
Correct.
intentions are going to affect future probabilities and hence future outcomes, basically.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, there are multiple possibilities in the future, right?
Hmm.
People with good intentions, if the earth abounds with people, earth has lot of people that have good intentions, then the probability of good happening for humanity in the future increases.
Right. Yeah.
If there are lot of ethical people, then the probability of good increases for humanity in the
Correct.
future.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it, na? So
Yeah.
that's how intentions affect the future. And
Hmm.
that's why ethics is inside the mind, and actions and mental thoughts are what are heroic and ethical, and not really the exact consequences. Like, for example, let's say somebody tries to cure polio or cure cancer, let's say, for example,
Right.
and they fail, and somebody else is just lazing around, basically. There are three
Yeah.
states of existence, right? The
Correct.
active
Correct.
state, the mediocre state, and the passive state. So,
Right.
existence of human neurology, you can say.
Correct. Correct.
So, in the past, somebody is just chilling around in the passive state, they are not doing anything. Somebody in the active state is trying very, very hard in
Hmm.
order to actually solve for cancer, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Let's assume that solving for cancer is one of the aims of humanity and it is going to increase the longevity of humanity. As of now, let's assume this, basically. Like, it's a
Okay.
desirable trait. Let's assume for now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Why it is a desirable state, we will justify later, basically. But let's now, without justification, assume that
Okay.
just by, you can say, intuition as of now, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So less disease is better for humanity. Let's assume that for now. All
Hmm.
right. So let's say the outcome is that they are not able to find a cure for cancer. Let us say.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Then in that particular scenario, it might so happen that they might think, oh, what did I do with my life? No outcome and output came. Look at that guy just chilling there, like sitting on the sofa and drinking beer, basically, just being lazy and
Hmm.
enjoying
Hmm.
their ignorance, laziness blissfully.
Right.
Just like ignorance is bliss, laziness is also bliss, right? Right?
Yeah.
Energy comes very hard.
Yeah.
You need to make active effort for energy, basically.
Right.
So conserving energy is equivalent to laziness.
Yeah.
Let's understand that. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So let's look at that person. They are just lazing around. I invested 30 years of my life in trying to cure cancer, and at the end of it, I am at the same level, and that lazy person who just chilled for 30 years is also at the same level, basically.
Hmm.
Then what did
Hmm.
I gain? It's like a basic level human, very human question that might occur, right?
Right.
For a cancer researcher, basically.
It's almost similar to comparisonitis, but in a different domain, right? Contributions domain.
Yeah, in the
Really good.
contributions domain.
Right.
But then this is what they gained. While they were struggling and trying to find the cure for cancer,
Right.
they elevated the probability of longevity of humanity to certain level by certain point.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Right.
hence they gained a lot of HD. And guess what? In the process of trying to do so, they also gained meaning in their life. So you see, there are various different dimensions of the human psyche,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
in the
Yeah.
laziness sloth dimension, they definitely suffered,
Yeah.
but they gained proportionately much more in the meaning dimension, basically,
Correct. Correct.
the aim of life dimension, basically.
Correct.
And this is what I keep saying, that we cannot fool ourselves and we cannot do things that are counterproductive for humanity and still be happy.
Hmm.
This is the message in religious textbooks also. I'm trying to mathematically justify it, basically.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I had to think a lot to arrive at these mathematical conclusions, basically.
Right.
So I need to be able to mathematically prove this, right? Why is excess masturbation bad?
Hmm.
Because it feels good in the moment.
Right.
Why is excess laziness bad? Because it feels really like good in the moment, basically.
Right.
Why is excess sugar bad?
Hmm. Again, same.
Same, it feels good in the moment. Why
Right.
is it bad? And if I cannot have a logical prefrontal cortex justification, like I don't want answers like it.
Yeah.
Understand it's bad for you. Don't you get that gut feeling that you're just wasting your life? No, gut feeling might be wrong or right. Feelings are feelings, right? Basically,
Hmm. True. True. Yeah.
feelings may be right or wrong. Basically, correct.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
for example, most people on planet Earth today have approach anxiety.
Right.
Earlier, approaching the wrong tribe or the wrong person might have meant that you will be killed. But today,
Hmm.
there is nothing like that.
Correct. Yeah.
But the neurology has still not gotten over this. So there is still approach anxiety today in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
So feelings that lead to intuition and gut feelings may or may not be right.
Hmm.
And
Correct.
that's what led to my obsessiveness, like embarking upon this journey of the mathematical justification of why
Right.
sin is bad,
Right. Right.
basically. So that's the thing. So in this particular context, there are a couple of more things. So one thing is like we keep mentally modeling and picturing like how we are behaving, right? So
Right.
one mental model I am giving here, actually multiple now. So see, let's look at this. This is kind of net worth versus time. Okay.
Right.
So if we are living, we are consuming resources, correct?
Correct.
So let's assume that we are at this resource level right now. This
Hmm.
is the level, okay, at a certain particular time. Okay. So now, as companies or individuals, we need to think about slopes. Please understand. Okay.
Okay.
So let us say, how do you like? How would you say the salary of the employee is more or less? Basically, okay. The best way to say it is,
Hmm.
let's say you are already having a certain expense. So basically, let's say here is your expense basically, and the difference between what you have and your expense basically per unit time is kind of the runway. So your expense is kind of catching up to you, right? Basically,
Right. Right.
you have
Yeah.
certain savings in your bank account right now, let's say $1 million, and your expense is catching up to you. If you don't do anything, if let us say savings are constant, then the expense will catch up to you, and then you will be broke at certain point in time,
Correct. Correct.
right? So if you don't want that, then this slope has to also go up, right? And
Yeah.
preferably, it has to go much more up compared to the slope of savings, basically.
Correct. Correct.
So let's say an employee is charging you $10,000 per month, which is like a
Hmm.
quite a hefty amount basically by today's
Hmm.
standard, right?
Hmm.
But let's say because of them, you are earning $50,000 per month extra in revenue and
Yes.
30,000 in profit basically, let's say.
Right. Right.
Okay. So ultimately, your slope is being elevated by $30,000, yeah, 30K dollars per month,
Yes.
because net worth versus time. So this the slope exactly gives us this only rate at which
Correct.
money is
Correct.
getting
Money is
increased.
coming in.
So basically, you did increase the slope of your expense at 10K per month by
Yeah.
hiring that employee. And somebody may feel that, oh, the people who are salary minded and not
Hmm.
business minded may feel, oh, I'm making 10,000 per month expense. Oh my God, what am I doing
Hmm.
basically?
Hmm.
So much expense. Instead, I will save that amount of money.
Right.
So this is how salaried minded people think basically,
Right. Right.
generally. So business minded people, they will think that what is this slope and what is this slope?
Hmm. Right.
And the difference between the current expense level, or you can say, you can even say that the expense, this expense, you can put the x-axis over here actually, because the expense is actually cutting away at your savings, right? You can say
Right.
it is kind of devouring you from the bottom basically.
Correct. Correct.
So you are
Yeah.
supposed to elevate the up top basically, so that you keep increasing your runway and also keep increasing your rate of net worth increase. So both things you are supposed to take care of.
Hmm.
Increase the runway and increase the rate of
Literally.
net worth increase basically, right?
Yes. Yes.
So an employee, it is more expensive to not hire a good employee. Think.
Hmm. Correct. Because that runway
And
keeps
another
reducing
another
and
phenomena that happens is any
yeah.
bad employee hire or hiring decision is minus X. For one,
Yeah.
2 months, they might just take your salary, something like that, take a free salary from you. So it's
Hmm.
minus X. Any wrong decision is kind of minus X, minus X, minus X. But right decisions are exponentiated, basically.
Hmm. Correct.
So
Correct.
a right decision can be plus 20X. So a few
Hmm.
right decisions can pay for a lot of wrong decisions. This is also one of the reasons because of which Warren Buffett is so successful. A few right decisions can pay for a lot of bad mistakes, basically.
Okay, okay, okay,
But this statement is more true if you are more leveraged and have a lot of runway.
okay.
This
Right.
statement is more true because a bad decision may cost you a lot if you don't have anything already. If you don't have a lot of
Yes,
net worth, then a
yes,
bad decision may cost you a lot.
yes, yes.
Like for example, if you are a billionaire and if you
Hmm.
bet on a poker table or on a gambling table, if you bet $100,000, it's
Hmm.
barely going to like create a small dent also in your portfolio.
Correct, correct, correct.
But if you are already broke and then you are borrowing those $100,000 and then gambling basically, then it's going to be like more hurtful for you.
Yes, yes, yes. So I
Yeah.
guess this is why this also explains why, I mean, in a different way or in a mathematical way, it explains why it is very hard for startups to succeed, right? Because you're operating from very low resources, so even a bad few bad decisions can completely kill the
Yes,
company.
exactly correct. And startups don't fail; they just run out of money basically
Okay, right, yeah.
because let us say something is going to work in humanity, right? So that
Hmm.
means that if they can iterate long enough, they could have
Yeah,
reached a product or service situation which
right,
could have been profitable, basically.
right, right. It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, they
So
never
startups don't
started
exactly
too
fail; they
purely.
just run out of money, basically. So
Got it, got it.
it's about managing the slopes in such a manner that the upper slope is much higher than the cost slope, basically.
Yes, yes,
The
yes,
revenue slope is much higher than the cost slope, and hence
yes,
your runway keeps increasing because see, the rate of runway increase is basically proportional to the difference between the revenue and the cost slope, right?
yes,
Basically,
yes,
if
yes,
revenue slope is much higher, then you are reaching here, the cost is flatlining. Cost is flatlining,
yes,
you are
yes,
upping basically. So
yes.
earlier your runway was only this much, let's say 2 years worth of runway, because
Hmm.
your revenue increased a lot but cost did not increase a lot. Now you have got 5 years of runway.
Correct, correct,
Now you can
correct.
afford to take more decisions from the top money, basically, something
Yes,
like that.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes. So the further away doom and deprivation is from you, the higher
Hmm.
risk you can take from the marginal money that you can afford to
Yes,
lose.
yes, 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 yes.
So this is one model that I wanted to document over here. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now another thing, okay, this is like we can call this as slopes, but thinking in terms of slopes. And
Slopes.
now when things start correlating with each other,
Hmm.
now there is like amazement at the fact that why didn't we ever think in terms of net worth versus time? Like this happened with me basically
Okay.
when I
Yeah.
first documented this properly.
Right,
Like
right. No, this is actually brilliant for, I mean, to think of business to, if you want to develop a business-minded
right.
mindset, I think this is really good. I'm already thinking
Hmm.
very differently now. Nice.
Correct, correct, exactly. So let's look at another model again,
Hmm.
correlating it back with the original OG, the original HDHO model.
Right,
Okay,
right.
so
Okay.
we humans are trying to climb Pareto's, right? Like
Hmm.
exponential distributions, right? Currently
Correct.
in the tech age, basically, or in the leverage
Right,
age, basically. Okay.
right.
So now I am kind of drawing a mountain-like thing, basically. I'm trying to draw a mountain-like thing,
Acha, acha.
and wherein which, like, what I am saying is we are trying to climb, basically. Okay.
Hmm.
So this is the HDHO line, which is kind of we are looking at it from perspective view. Okay. So this is the HDHO line. We are trying to
Right.
climb on the HDHO line, basically.
Okay.
Okay. And
Okay.
this is also a mountain. The human being is currently at, let us say, a plateau. This is where
Acha.
the human being is currently. Okay.
Okay.
So when he looks towards his left hand side,
Hmm.
basically, when he looks towards his left hand side, he sees what? He sees all the sins of, you can say, gluttony, sloth, envy,
Mhm.
jealousy, lust, all these things, right?
Right.
All the seven deadly
Yeah.
sins. So,
Correct. Yeah.
all the seven deadly sins are in this direction, basically,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
In this direction is nihilism. Nihilism means giving up, thinking that life is
Hmm.
meaningless, nothing makes sense, absurdism, nihilism, etc. Like
Hmm.
human life is inherently meaningless. So then he will negatively spiral down into depression, basically,
Right. Right.
something like that. On the left hand side, so this is the model of slippery slopes. Okay, so how human life is to be led with balance basically, and other, if you don't lead the human life with balance, then there are so many slippery slopes basically.
Okay, okay.
So this is the model of slippery slopes.
Right, right.
Okay, so on the left hand side of the human being are the hedonism based slippery slopes,
Yep,
the seven deadly sin based slippery slopes basically.
right.
On the right hand side are nihilism based slippery slopes, that human life is meaningless, it's all
Hmm.
unfair basically, like this is not correct, so on and so forth. Comparisonitis, etc. Like that also kicks in. So depression because of nihilism. So
Hmm.
that's why even celebrities or billionaires are also depressed sometimes basically.
Correct, correct.
And then behind him is the competition, because competition is making sure that if he stays at the same position then he will suffer, because like I told you in this particular graph, like costs will catch up with the savings, right?
Right, yeah, yeah.
So basically it's like competition is eating up at his savings. So imagine that a person has $1 million and there is inflation 5 6 times basically. Government just prints money. Now his
Yes.
$1 million is equivalent to $1,000, let's say.
Yeah, yeah.
So like he thinks that okay, he'll go and buy something with $1 million and he'll get some very small basket of goods and services
Right,
basically.
right.
So if he is not continually trying to build assets basically, then
Hmm.
that is a, like if he's stationary, then that stationary, being stationary itself is a backward slippery slope basically.
Yep,
Yeah.
correct,
So you
correct.
can say
Yeah.
this is deprivation.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it is kind of correlated with, less deservance, less obtainance also basically. Not in the criminal domain, but okay, you did
Right.
not do anything, you lazed around basically. So your deservance is also less and hence your obtainance is also less basically.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
this is deprivation. On the right hand side, you have got nihilism, pessimism,
Yeah.
okay, absurdism, and so on and so forth. On the
Hmm.
left hand side, you have got the famous
Hedonism.
hedonism,
Hedonism.
okay, and then these are the slippery slopes that the human being is surrounded by.
Right, right.
So the human being has to climb this, okay,
Hmm.
climb this Pareto. And by the way, if you look at it from the side view, if you look at it from the side view, the Pareto looks like this. This Pareto, if you look at it from this view, like from this angle,
From
the
outside.
Pareto looks like this. Okay. So you make effort. You make like this effort. So the JS curve basically. Okay.
Right.
You make effort, and if you reach MRP, then in that case, in fact, the effort, just a second, wait. The
Hmm.
effort looks something like this. More effort. Effort is more. Okay. Effort is more. And if you reach MRP, then you'll have to climb the activation energy and then you reach a certain plateau.
Okay.
This is how it looks like. Again, you have to sacrifice, make effort, and then you climb this and then reach a certain higher plateau. So there
Right.
is some stabilization. So what does that mean? Like for example, now USA is a superpower in the world. Okay, it
Hmm.
has, because of whatever World War II situation and because of many factors that I don't want to get into right now, because I don't want this to be geopolitical. Because of whatever reason, USA, like the dollar rules, like basically the dollar or the petrodollar, basically the dollar
Yeah.
essentially is the reserve currency of the world, right? Because of
Correct.
that, USA has been able to borrow a lot and they are so much in debt, but still creditors are not making them bankrupt because of the value of the dollar. Because
Yes,
just
yes.
because sociology exists in such a state right now, that dollar
Hmm.
happens to be the reserve currency of the world.
Correct.
This also happens because countries exist, and in the future, I am also going to suggest that countries should not exist, but that is
Hmm.
another conversation basically. Okay,
Right, right.
so basically, what we are talking about is once that USA is, like, let's say, one of the leading powers of the world, then it is very difficult to dethrone USA. It requires
Hmm.
that much amount of activation energy basically.
Correct, correct. Yeah, yeah.
So it's like that. So once the reservation policy is enacted by a particular government, it is very difficult to change the sociological state basically.
Right.
So things have inertia, and this
Yeah.
activation energy is a representation of that inertia basically. It's
Correct,
very difficult to reach there, but once you reach there, it's very difficult to dethrone you also.
correct, correct. Yeah.
But since destruction happens easier than construction, it is easier to dethrone than to reach.
Hmm. Makes sense.
It is
Yeah,
easier to dethrone than to reach basically, but
yeah.
not that easy also.
Hmm.
For example, if there is a billionaire celebrity, it's very difficult for them to become bankrupt. They'll have to make colossal, huge amount of mistakes, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Multiple mistakes over a long period of time they'll have to make again and
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
So reaching becoming a celebrity because of luck is also a very probabilistically less probable phenomena, and it
Right.
is more even lesser probable than
Reach.
sorry, dethroning them is more probable, and
Yeah.
becoming celebrity and becoming a billionaire is less probable.
Less probable. Yeah.
Yeah. But dethroning themselves from that position is also a less probable event, but becoming that is even lesser probability,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So becoming is more difficult than dethroning, but dethroning is also not as easy as
Correct.
it may sound or it may seem at
Correct.
first
Correct.
glance,
And
basically.
at each plateau, the effort taken to dethrone is also increasing. At least if you want to compare with that, then
Correct. And by the way, these I have drawn over here, but these are actually Paretos. They are like this, basically.
okay, okay,
They
okay.
they are
Exponential.
exponentials, basically.
Right, right. Okay, okay.
They are exponentials like this.
Yes.
So you can see na, that let's say a normal person, like in the USA, a normal person earns approximately $50,000 per annum, and the
Okay.
richest billionaires are in like $200 billion or something like that, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
$200 billion is so much more compared to $100,000, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So these are exponential Paretos because of the current
Right.
technological revolution, uh, which is because of the energy revolution. Okay. So
Right.
now here what happens is this is like the thing that I drew over here is actually in micro detail like this. Are you getting it?
Yeah, yeah. That I got. Yeah, yeah. You've
So this
smoothened
is
it out when you're showing the
yeah,
parameter.
the next plateau is like this basically, and this is
Yeah.
like an exponential thing.
Correct. Correct.
You can fall down also, but falling is also not that easy. But climbing is even harder, basically.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is some moat when you reach a certain socio-economic status. You gain some contacts, you gain some money. You maybe
Mhm.
buy a house or multiple houses. Then you can potentially give them on rent and earn more. So money
Yeah.
begets money, right? Something like
Correct.
that.
Correct. Correct.
Money can be used to make more money. So it is difficult for you to fall down when you reach a certain stage,
Right.
but it is not as difficult as climbing to that stage, basically.
Yes. Yes.
So this is what we mean.
Yeah.
All right. And the next thing I wanted to talk about with respect to this particular model is the following. There can be three types of human existence, psychological or net worth wise. One can be like we already talked about that, but now I'm trying to kind of elaborate more basically the active
Okay.
existence, the mediocre existence, and the kind of lazy existence. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
So, lazy existence, when it goes towards the dopaminergic side, then it becomes like addictive and depressed basically. We talked
Hmm.
about the three types of existence na, here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
the passive existence, if it goes towards the dopaminergic side, this is the dopa
Huh.
side, the L side, right?
Okay. Right.
If
Correct.
it goes, then here addicts get
Yeah.
created.
Yeah.
Addicts get created. And
Yeah.
here, if it goes towards the right side, then you can say monks get created.
No.
Monks and meditation centers, etc., get created. Something like that, basically.
Right. Right.
You can now extrapolate how humanity is. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go to this and see what's happening neuropsychologically. Let's understand what's happening neuropsychologically. Okay.
Right.
So I'm just going to like draw a horizontal line over here, which represents like the base level. Okay.
Hmm.
So let's take the example of a normal typical IT employee. IT employee.
Okay.
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 So what they are doing is they are going to the office, and because of that they are having a psychological state crash because they don't associate meaning with their work basically.
Right.
They don't think like, okay, because of my job I am earning money, and because of the money I'll be able to do some good at some old age shelter or something like that basically.
Hmm. Right.
So they don't associate meaning with their work. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
They can be parents, and as parents they might associate some meaning with their work, that okay, because they are parents, their kids will eat well, sleep well, etc,
Right. Right.
etc. But
Right.
the typical IT worker is depressed. Basically, this I know. Like
Hmm.
this is
Okay.
statistically known also.
Okay.
Basically,
Okay. Okay.
okay, because they are working in a very unnatural environment, right? Typing keys is not a natural human environment.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Right.
Typing keys on a computer and trying to, logic your way through the computer, even though
Huh.
it sounds fun, it's not a very natural human environment, basically.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Let's understand that. So basically what's happening over here is like they go to the companies, they psychologically become depressed, and then they
Yeah.
come back home and then they watch cricket matches which is like heavy dopaminism. And then
Right.
while watching cricket matches, they might smoke a cigarette and drink Coca-Cola. So they'll have the dopaminergic high in order to
Correct.
compensate for their work day, and then they'll have a crash, and then they will sleep basically. And on the
Hmm.
second day again, they will have depression because of the office, and then
Right.
again a dopaminergic spike and a crash. So this kind of a thing goes on basically,
Right.
right?
Right.
And this is the definition of kind of a mediocre type of life, right? Think.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Correct.
they are hovering around the baseline only.
Yeah.
We can say they don't have, let's say, lot of financial worries basically, because
Hmm.
they are just getting paycheck to paycheck type of salary, not great investments or something like that, but they are
Correct.
just living a mediocre life basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now some people from here or otherwise
Hmm.
can actually overdo the drinking part, overdo the smoking part, overdo the drugs part, and
Yes.
because of that, they will suffer from that dopamine crash, dopamine crash kind of thing,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
this is the depression and addiction cycle, right?
Hmm.
So this is the depression slash addiction cycle.
Correct. Correct.
Okay, and some others will use stoicism and then again live average lives, but what they will do is they like the life of monks is like pretty flat, so there is no negativity and there is no positivity also. Like I
Right.
had once calculated, it is possible to live on 2000 rupees a day, sorry, 2000 rupees a month.
Oh, okay.
2000 rupees a day is like kind of
Ah,
life actually. Yeah. 2000 rupees a month. So
Acha, okay.
you can manage your expenses, but then what happens is you do not have any insurance basically. So if anything, any bad or black swan event happens, like an accident or a disease or something like that, you cannot
Yes.
take care of that basically.
Correct. Yeah.
So monkeyism or monasticism will not make future troubles or unforeseen circumstances avoided basically.
Hmm.
So till the time
Right.
those unforeseen circumstances don't happen, till that time you can just chill. You are at a flat line. You are not going negative like the IT worker. And since you are kind of in brahmacharya, you are not going dopaminergically positive also basically.
Correct. Correct.
So you are kind of flatlining yourself. Sometimes this is
Yeah.
necessary because people are overstimulated.
Hmm. Okay.
So in some phases of life, this might be useful actually.
Okay. Okay.
You are more or less on a flat line and enjoying the simple pleasures of life like sunlight, air,
Hmm. Hmm.
oxygen. You are being thankful that okay, you were able to live life, etc. This gift
Right.
of life was given to you, etc. But
Right.
I can logically prove it that this is not maximizing the area under the emoji graph basically,
Hmm. Okay.
because of the
Okay.
simple concept of diminishing marginal utility. For how much time are you going to enjoy the sunlight?
Hmm.
See, if you are inside a prison and then you
Right.
come out of the prison and then you enjoy the sunlight, then you will feel very elated, and that is because of the contrast principle.
Right.
And then the fallacy that you make is, oh, the sunlight is so great and I have enjoyed so much of it. So I am very thankful for my life. This is a good way to express gratitude.
Right.
Definitely it is, but it is also a fallacy
Hmm.
because it
Makes
is
makes sense.
physically and biologically impossible for you to enjoy too much sunlight. Nothing against the sun. I actually worship the sun.
Right.
So it is like just joking. Like I really worship the sun, joking about like the overall context. All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So it is biologically impossible for you. Biologically, it is impossible for you to enjoy the sun to such an extent that you are thrilled by the sight of the sun every single day for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
This is human biology because of
Correct.
the simple concept of diminishing marginal utility, basically.
Yeah.
On the third, fourth day, the sun would be just normal, basically. It's like that.
Hmm.
So that's why monkeyism can stabilize you. It can infuse minimalism and stoicism in you, remove greed. So it can remove the risk factor, you can say, of getting depressed.
Hmm. Right.
But then it will also mean that elevation is also less because of the same
Yeah.
phenomena. So
Got
when
got
low risk, low reward, like that, na?
Right.
Basically.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. So if
Hmm.
we can re-paraphrase and add meaning to the effort that we are taking and the sacrifices that we are making,
Right.
then the sacrifices are also giving us meaning in life. So we are elevating ourselves on the meaning plane. Okay, so
Correct.
even though
Correct.
we are
Yeah.
sacrificing, so as to say, somewhere else on the meaning plane, we are elevating ourselves.
Yeah.
And because of this sacrifice, we are getting that JS curve of progress, basically.
Okay.
And when we infuse that with once in a while type of dopaminism, and then again go on the JS curve of progress,
Right.
once in a while dopaminism, JS
Hmm.
curve of progress, once in a while dopaminism. So this is how winners live, basically. Got it?
Right.
So by winners, I don't exactly, okay,
Or emoji
active,
maximizers or something.
maximizers, you can say. So this is how active people live. But then the human psyche is so neuroplastic and so versatile that
Right.
even a power hungry person like Hitler may
Huh.
think that he is on this trajectory.
Hmm.
And even a smart con man
Right.
may think that he is on this particular trajectory.
Right. Right. Okay.
So there can be a power fallacy here, there can be a hedonism fallacy over here, and there can be the actual active contribution to humanity non fallacy, or the way in which people should be,
Right.
basically.
Right.
So you can say these are the three different trajectories. One is the trajectory of mediocrity,
Hmm.
okay. One is the trajectory of achievement,
Hmm.
and one is the trajectory of, you can say, depression slash addiction. You can say
Addiction. Correct. Correct. Correct.
something like that, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. A better way to represent this would be a better way. I have found a better way to represent this. Let's say this is like the central line, which is like the HO line, the y axis, basically. Okay.
Okay.
So some humans basically are starting at, so okay, this is like the x axis, so base level.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
some humans are starting over here and they are moving in this direction, basically. See, nobody can achieve infinity, right? So like progress is going to look like the JS curve only.
Right.
So progress is going to look something like this only, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So again, the JS curve can start here also, and in between it can be infused with like some dopaminism, etc. Something
Hmm.
like that. So
Hmm.
this tells us about dopaminism, a spike and then a crash,
Correct.
basically.
Correct.
The
Correct.
crash has to be manageable. So some humans can be like this, okay. So you can now see that this is now going to correlate, basically. Okay, this is R1, R2,
Right.
R3, R4. Okay, think about it. And
Hmm.
let's say L1, L2, L3, L4.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
some humans are starting and then moving in these trajectories, basically.
Yes. Yes.
So generally, the people who are in R1 also have more luck. That means they have already started higher on the HO graph, etc.
Hmm.
So these are
Hmm.
the trajectories of life, basically. We'll mention elsewhere what R1, R2, R3, R4, L1, L2, L3, L4 is, because see, the body of knowledge will ultimately become coherent, right? Basically, because
Correct.
there is so much to express that every point in time, everything will be linear is not a certainty, basically.
Hmm.
So basically, you can think like this, that okay, a person is starting or like getting born, basically, then
Right.
R1, R2, like these are the trajectories that they are moving in. And sometimes what happens is there is a combination also. Like, for example, an investor can also have some L side behavior in them, etc., etc., so on and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
So kind of this kind of a trajectory is also something that we can think about. And also we can think like this, like let us say, let's talk about the men on planet Earth as of now. Only the men,
Hmm.
basically. Okay. So
Right.
let's say there are these middle class boys that are born and they work for MNCs like Google and Facebook, etc. So this is how
Right.
their trajectory looks like, basically.
Right.
Like let us say the lower middle class boys are born and they kind of remain at their level, or because of inflation their level goes down, basically, because
Hmm.
inflation just steals away money, na, basically, and they have
Correct.
only savings and not assets, basically.
Correct.
And very rarely a middle class boy just shoots up and, let's say, like Sundar Pichai becomes the head of Google or something like that, basically.
Right. Right.
Right. And then there are the privileged, basically. They
Right.
already own assets. So unless they are like Dan Bilzerian and foolish enough, basically, to get out of
Yeah.
that plateau, okay. So
Hmm.
if they are foolish, then they will fall. If they are
Correct.
not foolish, then they will at least maintain the asset level, basically.
Yes. Yes.
Asset also. And if they are innovative, then they can really, really exponentiate further and further down.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's how the winners keep winning and the losers stay losers, basically. And if you are
Right.
below certain level, you go down.
Yeah.
So you can again see parallelism with respect to what we earlier mentioned. So the winners keep winning, yeah.
Yeah.
The have-nots find it difficult to become somebody, something. It
Hmm.
requires extreme Herculean effort, okay. and
Right.
the middle class kind of tends to be middle class basically, kind of, not
Right.
exactly, they have upward trajectories available to them basically, but
Hmm.
somewhat basically. So this is
Right.
what happens, we can think like this also
Right.
basically.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so this is one way we can twist this and put it along the HDHO graph also, that is another way, but again, like this is some mental models basically. Okay,
Right. Right.
yeah. Yes. So I have
Hmm.
covered all the things that I wanted to cover with respect to the maximally moral lane. Very powerful, very strong mental model, basically.
Right. Right.
Okay. So ultimately, what's the summary? We should go along the maximally moral lane and trust our human intuition to keep us away from sin. And we all have that human intuition that tells us that whatever is morally wrong. And if something morally wrong we do, then it will have lot of downstream consequences, because then we will not be able to call ourselves as a moral human being. So we won't be able to face ourselves in the mirror, so as to say.
Right. Right.
Because a person cannot be happy in the long run by doing bad for humanity.
Hmm.
They may
Yeah.
think rationally also, they may think like the HDHO graph fallacy. One fallacy exists in the HDHO graph, right? That
Right.
you need to have $1 billion basically. Like you
Right.
need to
Right.
have whatever is the at least half of the difference between like your deservance level and the deservance level of the guy who has obtained more basically.
Yeah.
Right. So let us say his obtainance versus your obtainance, whatever is the difference compared to,
Hmm.
like, basically what I mean is your obtainance minus deservance is at a certain level. His obtainance minus deservance is at a
To a
certain
certain
level.
level.
Right. So the fallacy that exists is you need to go half, then
Half of
half
that.
of the
Yeah.
difference, basically, like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you need to completely go in that direction. And then another fallacy that exists is because of this, now you can, by the way, very important. Why is the maximally moral lane called as the maximally moral lane? Okay, I'll continue the earlier statement. It is correlated. So, because of this fallacy, now you can choose to do bad to others, basically thinking that you are yourself suffering. So, humans justify
Right.
doing harm to other humans and
Right.
future humans because they
Right.
themselves are suffering. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
and why
Correct.
is this called as the maximally moral lane, basically? This 199 to 99 one, why is it called as the maximally moral lane? Because it is not perfectly moral, na?
Right. Yeah.
See, I did not win in my IIT JEE competition, okay, and I did not go to IIT Bombay by making sure that everybody who was giving IIT JEE in that year had the
Hmm.
book that I had to study from.
Correct. Correct.
Perfect morality means perfect competition also, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So human effort is limited, and the to be done tasks are so unlimited or so vast, you can say. The set of to be done tasks are so what? Because of the entropic principle only. Entropy keeps
Hmm.
increasing.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
because of that, I cannot go like that. So that's why this is called as the maximally moral lane and not the perfectly moral lane.
Got it. Correct.
Because perfect morality will imply perfect competition.
Hmm.
But I cannot wait for perfect competition because I am dying.
Yeah.
At age 17, 15 also I was dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when we are dying, we
Right.
tend to do the best that we can. And going in the maximally moral lane is the best that we can do, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we are avoiding the slippery slopes of hedonism and the traps of nihilism, and
Realism.
we are going forward in life, even fighting the resource battle and overcoming competition. But we are doing it in the maximally ethical way.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I told you, the pie of GDP is finite. The
Hmm.
energy that is coming from Earth is finite, basically, and it's going to
Correct.
end also sometime hence. So,
Correct.
if you look at these 200 years, the pie of the human economy is finite. So, if you are grabbing some part of the pie, if you, your family, your progeny is going to grab some part of that particular pie,
Hmm.
that means that particular pie is not available for somebody else. It is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So that means if you do some, like for example, Sham goes to the supermarket and buys a pen to write with.
Hmm.
That means now Sham has done some injustice on somebody somewhere.
Hmm. Hmm.
But this is true.
Yeah.
And this is unavoidable. If we
Hmm.
think like this, then we cannot live our lives. And
Yeah.
that's why comes this comes to the rescue. The maximally moral lane comes to the rescue, basically.
Right.
So 90% of effort you have to make in order to even prevail at that particular status, whatever
Hmm.
stature you are at,
Right.
socio-economically, etc., in
Right.
life, and
Right.
hence 5% of effort. See, whatever your socio-economic status, net worth, etc., is, 5% of that will be higher only if the social status is higher, right? If the social
Uh-huh.
stature net worth is
Hmm.
higher, 5% of that is going to be high. If the
Correct,
social
correct.
stature
Uh,
network, etc., is
is
lower,
in
social capital
absolute
is lower, then 5%
5%
of that
below.
is also going to be lower.
Yeah, yeah.
So in proportion, we can say that 5% minimum should go to the world
Hmm.
and 5% maximum. So this is the min max principle. Minimum
Oh,
5% should be dedicated towards the world and maximum 5% dopaminism you should do.
hmm. Correct.
So
Yeah.
when we go to personal productivity, we are going to
Hmm.
talk about this min max principle and things like that
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Right, right.
So minimum 5% should go towards the world and
Correct.
maximum
Maximum
5%
for the dopamine.
hedonism or dopaminism you should do basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And anyway, 90% is not yours only because that is like a
Um,
forced battle basically.
right,
Okay.
right.
You are forced into a battle
Yeah.
by the virtue of just being born as a human being. Now you are Sisyphus. Now you have to suffer and be happy
Yeah.
with that suffering.
Right, right.
So the easiest way to be happy with the suffering is to infuse meaning into the suffering basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Correct.
whatever so much colossal amount of efforts we are having to take, let's learn to enjoy those efforts and even the
Hmm.
failure and let's laugh together even at the failures and the
Hmm.
suffering also.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
let's together suffer if we have to suffer basically. It's like that.
Right, right. Yeah.
So 90% anyway you have to suffer. So it's better to infuse meaning into that suffering basically to make
Correct.
it palatable, tolerable. So here is where the Viktor Frankl diaries come in basically.
Right.
So he was suffering, he tried to infuse as much meaning and the Anne Frank diaries also in Nazi
Yep.
Germany,
Yep. Yep.
right?
Right.
So they were suffering and they tried to infuse meaning in the suffering and tried to not lose hope in humanity,
Hmm.
basically, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's why this is the maximally moral lane, and this is how you should proceed along the maximally moral lane. Where have we
Yeah.
drawn it? Here.
There.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, no, here we have described it, but
This
we
right.
have
Okay. I have drawn
here
it.
we have drawn it basically.
Yes. Yes.
This is the maximally moral lane.
Correct.
So you can see that everything kind of correlates back with the deservance obtainance graph, basically,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So this is the maximally moral lane, and
Yeah.
like I told you, like later in life, you have to go give more basically. So from 199, you are moving to 99.
Yeah.
Got it, na? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
fine. So this terminates our second
This
model
is.
basically.
Huh.
Yeah, and the third model, that I will describe in the next pod basically. But the
Right.
third model is more to do with personal efficacy. So it's now going to, you can say, the application of maximally moral lane in personal life basically. It's something like that.
Right. Okay. Right. Right.
Yeah, maximally moral lane in personal day-to-day life. Because see, everything is intercorrelated. Your personal efficiency is intercorrelated with global efficiency, basically.
Okay.
And if you are a good human being, then the world wants you to prosper and succeed.
Right. Right.
And assuming that we all want to be good human beings, your
Hmm.
personal efficiency is related to what's ethically happening with the world. Because if you
Correct.
are a good human being, then you are going to do good for the world, and your prosperity is going to imply world's prosperity or
Correct.
humanity's prosperity.
Correct. I guess that's why it makes sense that you describe this because if we didn't know what the ethical thing to do is, then it doesn't make sense describing personal efficacy before that. No?
Exactly.
In a
That's
big
what I'm
picture.
trying to say to you,
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
Hitler was also very personally efficient
Right. Yeah, in the wrong direction. Correct.
in
Yeah.
the wrong direction. Personal
Yeah.
efficacy can be in any direction, right?
Correct.
But but in the long run, he lost basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had to commit suicide in the long run, right?
Yes. Yes. Correct.
Yeah. Fine. So in the next pod, we will discuss the excellence oriented model basically.
Okay.
This excellence oriented model will be infused with what we should do on a day-to-day basis for personal efficacy and personal productivity, you can say. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
So the excellence based model basically, so as to say. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So you can say, okay, you will ask the question, what is the difference between maximally moral model and the, okay, the difference between HDHO model and maximally moral model will be quite clear basically. There are a lot of
Correct.
differences basically.
Correct. Correct.
Maximally moral model is kind of the superset, or you can say the expansion of the HDHO model
Correct.
basically.
Correct. Yeah.
Now you will say the excellence model or chasing excellence model, which is the third model of ethics basically, and third
Hmm.
model of existing. Okay, why is it better? You can say, okay, so
Hmm.
it is better because it puts us into this state or it advocates this state basically.
Okay.
the
Okay.
active and ethically active state, basically.
Right. Right.
So that is why it is better.
Okay. Right.
The maximally moral model is kind of, you can say, value free. It just kind of tells us, okay, do like this kind of a thing, basically. But it doesn't give a compelling reason why we should make sacrifices to reach here from here or here, basically.
Acha. Okay. Okay.
So the virtue of the next model is that it will give us compelling reasons to go here by making sacrifices, basically.
Okay.
So it
Okay.
is kind of a rational basis for day-to-day sacrifice or sacrificial
Acha.
effort.
Okay. Okay.
So that's how it is different from the maximally moral model,
Okay.
maximal morality based model, maximally moral
Right.
lane model,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
Correct. And maximally moral lane model is kind of a superset of
Of the
the
HDHO. Huh.
LTHO model, basically.
Correct. Right.
It's like that. All right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Good progress. So for
Yeah.
today, in today's pod, we'll stop here and we'll continue on Sunday then. Okay.
On Sunday. Okay. Thursday, nothing?
Thursday. Yeah, let's continue on Thursday. Thursday is also
Okay.
possible.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
continue on Thursday. Yeah.
ठीक है.
All right.
Sounds.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. See you. Yeah. Bye.
Bye for today.